When a billionaire's life hung by a thread, the man who saved her wore a security guard's jacket, not a white coat. But what happened next would shake an entire city. This is the story of Nathan Cole, the forgotten hero who proved that real courage doesn't need recognition, and Scarlet Vale, the woman who almost let pride destroy the greatest gift she'd ever received. Stay with me until the end of this journey, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights in St. Haven Hospital's East Corridor had been flickering for 3 weeks. Maintenance kept promising to fix them, kept not showing up, and Nathan Cole had stopped filing reports about it. Some things you just learn to live with. He checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Emma would be getting tired by now, probably fighting sleep over her math homework in the corner booth of the cafeteria where Mrs. Chen always saved her a spot. 13 more minutes until his rounds brought him back that way. 13 minutes to check on his daughter, make sure she had enough quarters for the vending machine, remind her not to bother the night staff. This wasn't how Nathan had imagined fatherhood when Sarah was still alive. Back then, back when life made sense, he'd pictured soccer games and parent-teacher conferences at reasonable hours. Bedtime stories read in actual bedrooms, not hospital break rooms. A job that ended at 5, not one that stretched across the lonely hours when most people slept. But Sarah was 4 years gone, and grief didn't pay for a 2-bedroom apartment or keep a 9-year-old in shoes that fit. So he wore the jacket with security stitched across the back, walked the same halls night after night, and told himself this was temporary. Everything was temporary if you waited long enough. The radio on his belt crackled. "Nathan, you copy?" He unclipped it. "Yeah, Marcus, what's up? Got a situation in the main lobby. Drunk guy trying to see his brother in ICU. Won't take no for an answer." Nathan sighed. 3rd time this week. "On my way." He'd made it maybe 20 feet when the doors at the ambulance bay exploded inward. Not literally, though the sound was close enough that Nathan's hand went to his belt on instinct, reaching for equipment he hadn't carried in 6 years. 2 paramedics burst through, running, which meant something had gone very wrong. Paramedics didn't run unless they were losing. "Need a doctor!" The taller one was shouting, his voice cracking. "Now! Somebody get—" "Trauma 2's ready." A nurse Nathan recognized, Angela, worked weekends, was already moving, but her face had gone white. Jesus, what happened? Highway 9, head-on collision. The second paramedic was younger, barely old enough to shave, and his hands were shaking. "Driver's critical. Passenger DOA. We've been coding her for 6 minutes, lost her twice." Nathan was moving before he made the conscious decision to move. His legs just knew, the same way they'd known in Kandahar, in Mosul, in a dozen places whose names he'd tried to forget. The gurney was a mess, blood everywhere, soaking through sheets that had probably been white an hour ago. The woman strapped to it was young, early 30s maybe, with dark hair matted against her forehead and a face so pale it looked translucent under the harsh hallway lights. "Where's Dr. Morrison?" Angela had both hands on the gurney, helping navigate through the double doors. "Surgery?" someone called back. "Appendectomy ran long. He's still—" "Then get Hammond!" "Out sick. Stevens called in too. We're running on skeleton crew tonight." Nathan's training cataloged everything in the 3 seconds it took to process the words. Massive head trauma, probable skull fracture. Left arm twisted at an angle that meant shattered bones, multiple breaks. Chest compressed, likely fractured ribs, possible punctured lung. The heart monitor screaming its erratic warning that said she was slipping, fading, about 3 minutes from the kind of goodbye that didn't come with second chances. "She's crashing!" The young paramedic's voice went high. Somebody need to—" "Step back." Nathan didn't recognize his own voice. It came out flat, emotionless, the voice of someone who'd made impossible decisions in impossible places. Angela's head snapped toward him. "Nathan?" "I said step back." "Your security, but I know what I am." He was already at the gurney, already assessing, his hands moving to check pulse points his muscle memory hadn't forgotten. "I also know she's got maybe 2 minutes before her brain starts dying, and I don't see anyone else with better options, so you can either help me or get out of my way." Later, he'd wonder what made Angela trust him. Maybe the tone in his voice. Maybe the way his hands moved with absolute certainty while everyone else stood frozen. Maybe just desperate luck. Trauma 2, she said quietly. Now. They moved as a unit, the gurney wheels screaming on the linoleum. Nathan kept his fingers on the woman's neck, feeling the pulse flutter like a dying bird. Her lips were turning blue. The trauma room was small, cramped, nothing like the field hospitals he remembered. But trauma was trauma, and death didn't care about the zip code. Ambu bag, he snapped, and I need someone on compressions. The tall paramedic, his name tag said Rodriguez, moved without hesitation. How many? 30, then 2 breaths. Don't stop until I tell you. Nathan's hands found the woman's airway, tilting her head back, checking for obstructions. Blood in her mouth, but she was breathing. Barely. Shallow, rattling breaths that meant her lungs were compromised. Possible pneumothorax, he muttered. Angela, I need... She was already there with the supplies, moving like she'd worked with him for years instead of just passing him in hallways. Some people had the instinct, most didn't. Rodriguez started compressions. 1, 2, 3, lighter! Nathan's hand shot out, adjusting the man's position. You're too heavy. Fractures the sternum, and you'll puncture what's left of her lungs. Firm and fast, but controlled. Copy that. The heart monitor shrieked, flatline. She's gone. The young paramedic backed away, his face green. We lost her, Nobody's lost. Nathan grabbed the defibrillator paddles, his movements automatic. Clear! The woman's body arched off the table. The monitor blipped, hesitated, then slid back into chaos. Again, clear! Another shock, another desperate second where the universe decided if this stranger got to see tomorrow. The monitor beeped. Once, twice. Rhythm. There you are, Nathan breathed. Stay with me now, stay with me. He didn't know when he'd taken her hand, didn't remember making that choice. But his fingers were wrapped around hers now, and he could feel the faint fluttering pulse at her wrist starting to strengthen. Rodriguez was still doing compressions, sweat running down his face. How long do I keep until I say stop? Nathan was checking her pupils now, assessing the damage he couldn't see. Unequal dilation. Probable intracranial hemorrhage. We need imaging. We need... Dr. Morrison's out of surgery. Angela had a phone to her ear. They're prepping OR 3 now. She won't make it to surgery if we don't stabilize her first. Nathan reached for a pen light, checking responses. Possible basilar skull fracture. See the battle sign? Bruising behind the ears, and her left pupil's blown. We're looking at increased cranial pressure. You want to drill into her skull in a trauma bay? Rodriguez stared at him like he'd suggested amateur hour brain surgery. I want to keep her alive long enough for someone who gets paid to make those calls. Nathan adjusted the oxygen flow. But yeah, if Morrison doesn't get here in 3 minutes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. The room went quiet except for the machines and Rodriguez's steady count. Who the hell are you? The young paramedic finally whispered. Nathan didn't answer. He was too busy watching the monitors, calculating time and odds and all the ways this could still go wrong. His hand stayed wrapped around the woman's, his thumb pressed against her pulse point. You're going to see the sunrise, he told her quietly. You hear me? You're going to wake up tomorrow, and it's going to hurt like hell, and you're going to see the sunrise. Her fingers twitched, just barely, but enough. The doors slammed open. Dr. Morrison rushed in, still pulling on gloves, his eyes going wide as he took in the scene. What in the... Nathan? Severe head trauma, multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding. Nathan rattled off the stats without looking up. She coded twice in the ambulance, once here. I've got her stable, but she needs surgery now. Morrison moved to this gurney, his hands already assessing. How did you... You're not... He stopped, looked at Nathan properly for the first time. Really looked. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Nathan said simply. I've done this before. OR3's ready, Angela called. Morrison nodded sharply. Let's move. Good work, Nathan. We'll take it from here. They prepped to transfer. Rodriguez stepped back, flexing his hands. The young paramedic looked like he might throw up or pass out. Maybe both. Nathan started to pull his hand away from the woman's. Her fingers tightened. Just slightly. Her eyes fluttered, but didn't open. Hey. He leaned closer, keeping his voice low. You're going to be okay. You hear me? They're going to take good care of you now. He didn't know if she could hear him, didn't know if any of it registered through the trauma and the drugs and the body's desperate fight to keep working. But her hand squeezed his one more time before going slack. Then she was gone, wheeled away toward surgery, leaving Nathan standing in a trauma bay that smelled like blood and fear and close calls. Nathan, Angela's voice was gentle. You okay? Was he? His hands were steady. They'd always been steady when it mattered, but he could feel the adrenaline starting to fade, the familiar crash that came after, the weight of what he'd just done settling across his shoulders. Yeah, he lied. I'm fine. That was incredible. I've never seen... She stopped. Where did you learn to do that? Doesn't matter. He was already moving toward the door, already trying to put distance between himself and the memories that wanted to surface. I need to check on Emma. Nathan, wait. I'm fine, Angela. Really. Just tell Morrison to call me if he needs anything. He left before she could ask more questions. Left before anyone could look at him with that expression he'd spent 6 years trying to escape. The one that said, hero, and thank you, and why did you leave? The hallway was quiet again. The flickering lights kept flickering. Somewhere in the building, phones rang and nurses moved between rooms, and life continued like the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. Nathan checked his watch. 12:14 a.m. Emma. He found her exactly where he'd left her, curled in the corner booth with her head on her backpack, math homework sliding off the table. Mrs. Chen sat nearby, reading a magazine, keeping watch like she always did. Hey, sweetheart. Nathan gently shook his daughter's shoulder. Wake up. Time to go home. Emma blinked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep. Dad? Did you finish your rounds? Yeah, baby. All done. She sat up, rubbing her face. Can we get pancakes on the way home? It's after midnight. The diner's open. The diner's always open. Doesn't mean we need pancakes at midnight. But I want pancakes. She gave him that look, the one that was pure Sarah, the one he could never say no to. Nathan sighed. Fine. But just this once. You say that every time. And I mean it every time. Mrs. Chen smiled as they gathered Emma's things. You're a good father, Nathan Cole. If she only knew. If any of them knew what he'd just done. What he used to be, the life he'd left behind. But that was the thing about running from your past. Eventually you got good enough at it that people stopped seeing where you'd been. They just saw the jacket, the quiet man who walked the halls and didn't cause trouble. Outside, the storm had picked up. Rain hammered the parking lot, turning it into a maze of puddles that reflected the streetlights in broken fragments. Nathan held his jacket over Emma's head as they ran for the car, both of them laughing by the time they made it. Dad, you're soaked, Emma giggled as he started the engine. Yeah, well, one of us had to stay dry. You should have brought an umbrella. Should have brought a lot of things. The diner was nearly empty, just them and a tired waitress named Donna who knew their order by heart. Pancakes for Emma, coffee for Nathan, and the same vinyl booth by the window where they always sat. Emma drowned her stack in syrup, while Nathan pretended the coffee was good. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the streets clean for another day. Dad? Emma's voice was quiet. Yeah, sweetheart? Why do you always look sad when it rains? Nathan stared at his reflection in the window. When had she gotten old enough to ask questions like that? I don't look sad, he said. You do. Like you're thinking about Mom. His chest tightened. I always think about Mom. Me too. Emma pushed a piece of pancake around her plate. Do you think she'd be proud of us? I think she'd be proud of you. You're smart. You're kind. You work hard. What about you? Nathan didn't have an answer for that. Sarah had been proud when he enlisted, proud when he made it through training, proud every time he came home in one piece. But she'd never seen this version of him, the one who'd given up saving lives for checking ID badges and breaking up fights in hospital lobbies. She'd never seen him struggle to pay rent or feed their daughter on security guard wages, or pretend that he was fine with how small their life had become. Your mom loved me, he said finally. That's enough. Emma seemed to accept this. She went back to her pancakes and Nathan went back to his coffee, and they sat together in comfortable silence while the rain drummed against the windows. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Morrison. The patient from tonight made it through surgery. Stable condition. Wanted you to know. Also wanted to say, wherever you learned to do what you did, thank you. You saved her life." Nathan read it twice, then deleted it. "Who was that?" Emma asked. "Nobody important." "You're a terrible liar, Dad." "Yeah." He smiled despite himself. "I know." They finished eating around 1:30 a.m. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time they headed home, and Emma fell asleep in the passenger seat before they'd gone 3 blocks. Nathan carried her up the stairs to their apartment, navigating the darkness by memory, tucking her into bed without waking her. In his own room, he sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall. The adrenaline was completely gone now, replaced by the familiar emptiness that always followed the high. He'd forgotten how this felt, the sharp, clear purpose of emergency medicine, the weight of holding someone's life in your hands. He'd forgotten why he left it behind too. Almost. Nathan pulled open his nightstand drawer. The medals were still there, wrapped in the same cloth he'd used to pack them 6 years ago. He didn't take them out. Just seeing them was enough to remember. Enough to know that some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. He was about to close the drawer when his phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Angela. "The woman you saved tonight? She's somebody important, real important. Dr. Morrison said we're not supposed to talk about it, but I thought you should know. You did a good thing, Nathan." Nathan deleted that message too. Then he closed the drawer, turned off the light, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another night of walking halls and checking doors, and pretending that tonight had never happened. That was fine. That was safe. That was the life he'd chosen. But as he drifted off, he kept seeing her face, the pale, blood-soaked stranger whose hand had squeezed his in that trauma bay. Kept hearing her fingers tighten around his own, that tiny gesture of trust from someone who should have been too far gone to feel anything at all. "You're going to see the sunrise." He'd meant those words. Meant them the way he'd meant every promise he'd made in field hospitals and bombed-out buildings and places where hope went to die. You didn't make promises you couldn't keep, not when it mattered. The rain picked up again outside, steady and relentless. Nathan listened to it hit the window and thought about how water always found the cracks, how it seeped in no matter how carefully you sealed things, how it never stopped trying. Somewhere across the city, a woman he had never met was breathing in a hospital bed. Alive because he'd broken his own rules, stepped back into a life he'd sworn to leave behind. He wondered if she'd remember him when she woke up. Wondered if it would matter if she did. Probably not. People like her, important people, the kind who warranted hushed conversations and careful discretion, they lived in different worlds. They didn't remember the hands that pulled them back from the edge. They remembered the surgeons, the specialists, the names on the hospital wings, not the security guard in the stained jacket, and that was fine. Nathan didn't need recognition, didn't want it. Recognition meant questions, and questions meant explanations, and explanations meant digging up graves he'd spent 6 years trying to fill. So let her forget. Let everyone forget. He was good at being forgotten. 3 days passed before Nathan saw her again. He was on his usual rounds, East Wing, second floor, the pediatric ward where the nurses always saved him cookies from the family lounge, when Angela caught up with him near the elevators. "Nathan, she's awake." He didn't need to ask who. "That's good. Morrison must be relieved." "She's asking about you." Nathan stopped walking. "What?" "The patient from the crash. Scarlet Veil." Angela caught herself. "Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say the name, but anyway, she's awake, and she's asking who stabilized her before surgery." "Morrison stabilized her." "Morrison did the surgery. You did the saving." Angela crossed her arms. "She wants to thank you." "No." "Nathan." "I said no, Angela. I was just doing what needed to be done. Morrison and his team did the real work." "That's not what Morrison says." "He told her about you, about what you did. She wants to meet you." Nathan's jaw tightened. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Exactly why he'd deleted those messages, why he'd spent 3 days avoiding any conversation about that night. "I'm not interested in being thanked," he said flatly. "Tell her I'm glad she's okay. Tell her whatever you want. But I'm not meeting with her." "Nathan, I have rounds to finish." He walked away before Angela could argue further. Walked away from the gratitude he didn't want, the recognition he'd never asked for, the attention that would inevitably lead to questions about why a security guard knew advanced trauma medicine. The East Wing was quiet this time of day. Most of the kids were sleeping off lunch, their parents dozing in chairs or staring at their phones in that glazed way people got when they'd been in hospitals too long. Nathan checked doors, noted which rooms had visitors, made meaningless marks on his clipboard. This was his life. Simple, forgettable, safe. Exactly what he needed it to be. His radio crackled. "Nathan, got a visitor for you in the main lobby." "I'm not expecting anyone." "Well, someone's expecting you, says it's important." Nathan sighed. Probably Emma's school again, wondering why he hadn't returned their calls about the parent-teacher conference next month, or the landlord wanting to discuss the rent that was 3 days late. "On my way." The lobby was busy with the afternoon rush, visitors coming and going, patients being discharged, the normal chaos of a hospital that never slept. Nathan scanned the crowd, looking for whoever had asked for him. He found her by the reception desk, even pale and visibly exhausted, with a bandage wrapped around her head and her left arm in a sling. Scarlet veil was unmistakable. The kind of beautiful that came from excellent genetics and better money. The kind that made people turn and stare even when she was standing in a hospital lobby wearing borrowed clothes. Her eyes locked on him the moment he appeared. Dark eyes that held something Nathan couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or curiosity, or the calculating assessment of someone used to measuring people's worth. "Mr. Cole." She took a step forward, and he noticed the slight limp, the careful way she moved. "I've been trying to find you for 3 days." "I've been here." Nathan kept his voice neutral, his face blank. "Working." "Yes, I gathered that." Her gaze dropped to his security badge, and something flickered across her expression. Surprise, maybe? Or disappointment. "They tell me you saved my life." "The doctors saved your life. I just kept you breathing until they got there." "That's not what Dr. Morrison says." Dr. Morrison's being generous. Scarlett studied him, and Nathan had the uncomfortable sense of being X-rayed. "You don't want to be thanked." "I don't need to be thanked. I did what anyone would have done. Anyone with advanced medical training, perhaps. Which makes me wonder..." She paused. "Why is someone with your skills working as a security guard?" There it was. The question he'd been dreading, the crack in his carefully constructed walls. "Because that's the job I have," Nathan said evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my rounds." "Wait." She reached out, then winced and pulled her arm back. The sling. She'd forgotten about the sling. "I want to offer you something, a reward, money, or..." "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants money." "Then I'm not everyone." Scarlett's expression shifted again. Frustration now, mixed with something else. "I nearly died 3 days ago. I woke up in intensive care with a cracked skull and more metal in my arm than bone. The last thing I remember before everything went black was your voice telling me I'd see the sunrise." Her voice dropped. "I'd like to properly thank the man who made sure I could." Nathan met her eyes, saw the sincerity there, the genuine gratitude, saw also the weight of expectation, the assumption that his heroism came with a price tag or at least a story worth telling. He couldn't give her either. "You're welcome, Chet," he said quietly. "I'm glad you're okay, but I don't need anything from you, Ms. Vale. Just live better. Make it count." He turned to leave. "My foundation is hosting a charity gala next month," she called after him. "At the hospital. I'd like you to attend as my guest." Nathan stopped but didn't turn around. "I don't do galas. It's for the hospital's new emergency wing. They're naming it after my father." "Sounds like a family thing. I wouldn't fit." "Please." That one word carried more vulnerability than everything else she'd said combined. "I need to do something, to show my gratitude. This is the only way I know how." Nathan looked back over his shoulder. She stood there in the middle of the lobby, this powerful woman who probably had people falling over themselves to do her favors, and she looked suddenly very young, very alone. "I'll think about it," he lied. Then he left before she could say anything else, before those dark eyes could dig any deeper into the parts of himself he'd learned to bury. Emma was waiting in the cafeteria again that night, Mrs. Chen watching over her like always. Nathan slid into the booth across from his daughter and stole a French fry from her plate. Hey! Emma swatted his hand. Get your own. Mine tastes better when they're stolen. That's what thieves say. I prefer the term creative redistributor of resources. Emma rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. How was work? Boring. How was school? Also boring. Mrs. Patterson gave us a pop quiz in math. How'd you do? Perfect score. Emma said it casually like it was nothing, but Nathan saw the pride in her eyes. That's my girl. He reached across and ruffled her hair, ignoring her protests. Your mom would be so proud. Dad, everyone's looking. Let them look. I have a genius daughter. I'm allowed to embarrass her. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the cafeteria noise washing over them, conversations and laughter and the clink of trays. This was Nathan's favorite part of the day, just him and Emma, no questions about his past, no decisions about his future. Just this moment, simple and honest. Dad? Emma's voice went quiet. Are we poor? Nathan's hand stopped halfway to his coffee. Why would you ask that? Jenny Sanders said we must be poor because you work as a security guard and we live in an apartment instead of a house. Jenny Sanders sounds like she needs to mind her own business. Are we, though? Nathan considered his daughter's face, saw the worry there, the fear that maybe they were failing at something important. How did you explain to a 9-year-old that money wasn't everything? That some things, like being there when she needed him, like tucking her in at night, like not having to carry the weight of lives lost and battles fought, were worth more than any house Jenny Sanders' parents could afford? We have enough, he said finally. We have food, we have a place to sleep, we have each other. That's not poor, sweetheart. That's rich in the ways that matter. But wouldn't it be nice to have more? Sure. And maybe someday we will. But right now, this is our life, and I think it's pretty good. Emma thought about this, pushing another fry around her plate. I think so too, she said quietly. I just wish Jenny would shut up about it. Emma, sorry, I wish Jenny would be quiet about it. Nathan bit back a smile. Better. They finished dinner and headed home through streets still wet from afternoon rain. Emma fell asleep on the couch watching a movie she'd seen 100 times, and Nathan carried her to bed like he had when she was small enough to fit in one arm. In the kitchen, he opened his laptop and pulled up his bank account. $347 until next Friday's paycheck. Rent due in a week. Emma's school fees next month. The car making a noise he'd been ignoring because mechanics cost money they didn't have. He thought about Scarlet Vale's offer. Money. A reward. The kind of financial cushion that would mean not calculating every purchase, not choosing between fixing the car and buying Emma new shoes. Then he thought about what accepting that money would mean, the questions it would invite, the attention it would bring, the door it would open to a past he'd worked so hard to seal shut. Some prices were too high, no matter how much you needed what they were selling. Nathan closed the laptop and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another night of walking halls, another day of being forgettable. That was fine. That had to be fine. Because the alternative, stepping back into the light, letting people see who he used to be, that was a risk he couldn't take. Not for money, not for gratitude, not even for himself. Outside, the city hummed with its endless nighttime symphony. Nathan listened to it through the thin walls of their apartment and thought about a woman in a hospital bed, alive because he'd broken his own rules for 3 desperate minutes. Live better, he'd told her. Make it count. He wondered if she would, wondered if any of them ever really did. Then he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, and tried not to think about the sunrise he'd promised a stranger, or the ones he'd stopped letting himself see a long time ago. The nightmares came back on the 4th night. Nathan woke at 3 a.m. with his heart hammering and Sarah's name on his lips. The sheets twisted around his legs like they were trying to hold him down. In the dream, he'd been back in that field hospital outside Kandahar, except instead of the Marine with the sucking chest wound, it had been Scarlet Vale on the table. And instead of saving her, he'd watched her flatline while his hands fumbled with equipment that wouldn't work, wouldn't respond, wouldn't do anything except remind him that some people you couldn't save no matter how hard you tried. He sat on the edge of the bed for 20 minutes, waiting for his pulse to slow down, waiting for the images to fade. They didn't. They never really did. By the time his shift started at 11, Nathan had convinced himself the dreams meant nothing, just his brain processing stress, mixing memories with recent events, doing what brains did when you didn't sleep enough and thought too much. Marcus was already at the security desk when Nathan arrived, feet propped up, watching something on his phone. "You look like hell," Marcus said without looking up. "Thanks. You look like you're not doing your job." "It's a slow night. I'm pacing myself." Marcus finally glanced over. "You hear about the big gala thing next month?" Nathan shrugged out of his jacket. "Vaguely. Hospital's going all out. New emergency wing, fancy dinner, probably ice sculptures shaped like stethoscopes or whatever rich people think is classy." Marcus grinned. "We're pulling double shifts that week. Overtime pay, brother. I'm already planning what to spend it on." "Your rent, probably." "Your optimism is inspiring." Nathan clipped his radio to his belt and grabbed his clipboard. "I'm doing rounds. Try to stay awake. Try to smile occasionally. It won't kill you." The hospital was quiet in that particular way late nights got. Not silent, never silent, but muted. Machines beeped in distant rooms, nurses spoke in low voices at their stations. Somewhere someone was crying, and somewhere else someone was probably being born. And Nathan walked through it all like a ghost, there, but not there. He was checking the locks on the pharmacy level when his radio crackled. "Nathan, you got a visitor." He checked his watch. Nearly midnight. "I'm not expecting anyone." "Yeah, well, she's expecting you. Says her name's Scarlet Vale, and she's not leaving until she talks to you." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Tell her I'm busy." "I did. She said she'll wait." "Tell her I'm busy all night." "Nathan, man, she's not taking no for an answer. And between you and me, she looks like the kind of person who gets what she wants." Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to say he didn't care what kind of person she was, that his answer was still no, that she needed to leave him alone. Instead, he said, "I'll be down in 5. She was sitting in the same spot as before, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly salary. Dark jeans, silk blouse, heels that made soft clicks on the linoleum when she stood up. The bandage was gone from her head, replaced by a thin white scar that cut through her left eyebrow. Her arm was still in the sling. "Mr. Cole." She said it like they were old friends, like she hadn't just ambushed him at his workplace after midnight. "Ms. Vale." Nathan stopped a careful distance away. "It's late. You should be resting." "I've been resting for 4 days. I'm tired of resting." She took a step closer. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you saved my life and then disappeared like you were ashamed of it." "I'm not ashamed. I'm busy." "At midnight?" "Hospitals don't sleep, neither do security guards." Scarlett's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're very good at deflecting. And you're very persistent. I didn't build a company from nothing by taking no for an answer." "Good for you. But I'm still not interested in whatever you're offering." "You don't even know what I'm offering." Nathan shifted his weight, trying to calculate the fastest way to end this conversation. "Let me guess. Money. Recognition. Maybe a job doing something more important than walking hospital hallways. Am I close?" "You forgot the part where I publicly acknowledge what you did." "I don't want to be publicly acknowledged." "Why not?" "Because I don't." Scarlett studied him, her head tilted slightly. "Most people would jump at the opportunity." "Then find most people and acknowledge them." "But you're the one who saved me. And you're alive. Consider us even." Something flickered across her face, frustration maybe, or hurt. "Is it me? Did I do something to offend you?" Nathan sighed. This conversation was going nowhere, and standing here arguing with a billionaire in the middle of his shift was exactly the kind of attention he'd been trying to avoid. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just don't need anything from you. I did what I thought was right in the moment, and I'm glad you're okay, but that's where this ends. You go back to your life, I go back to mine. Simple." "Nothing about this is simple." "It is if you let it be." Scarlett opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Her hand went to the sling, adjusting it in a way that suggested the arm still hurt more than she wanted to admit. "The gala is in 4 weeks," she said finally. "I'd really like you to be there." "I already told you, Iqbal. I know what you told me, and I'm telling you that I need this, Mr. Cole. I need to do something to show my gratitude because that's how I was raised. And because the alternative is going to sleep every night knowing I never properly thanked the man who gave me a second chance. Her voice went softer. Please, just one evening. You don't have to give a speech. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. Just be there. Nathan looked at her, really looked, and saw past the expensive clothes and the confident posture to something more fragile underneath. She wasn't just asking. She was asking because she needed this in a way that went beyond politeness or social obligation. Why does it matter so much? He asked. Scarlett's smile was thin and didn't reach her eyes. Because for 3 minutes in that ambulance, I was dead. And when I came back, the only thing I remembered was your voice promising me a sunrise. She paused. I'm trying very hard to figure out what to do with that. The honesty of it caught Nathan off guard, made him see her differently, not as the powerful CEO who'd invaded his carefully ordered life, but as someone trying to make sense of trauma the only way she knew how. One evening, he said reluctantly, I show up, you say thank you, we both move on. That's it. Relief washed over her face. That's it. I promise. And no publicity, no press, no one needs to know who I am or what I did. Scarlett hesitated. The media already knows about the accident. They've been asking questions. Then lie to them. Tell them it was the paramedics. Tell them it was Morrison. Tell them whatever you want as long as my name stays out of it. Mr. Cole, those are my terms, Ms. Vale. Take them or leave them. She studied him for a long moment, and Nathan had the sense he was being measured against some internal metric he couldn't see. Okay, she said finally. No publicity. You have my word. Nathan nodded stiffly. Then I'll be there. Thank you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. My assistant will send you the details. If you need anything, I won't. But if you do, I won't, Ms. Vale. Good night. He turned and walked away before she could say anything else, before the cracks in his resolve could widen into something he couldn't control. Behind him, he heard the soft click of her heels on the floor, heard the quiet sound of her leaving. Marcus was grinning when Nathan got back to the desk. Smooth, Marcus said. Shut up. I'm just saying, not every day a billionaire shows up at midnight looking for you. She was just saying thank you. At midnight, in person. Yeah, totally normal. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What'd you do? Save her cat from a tree? Something like that. Man, you're the worst storyteller I've ever met. Nathan grabbed his clipboard. I'm doing rounds. You already did rounds. Then I'm doing them again. He spent the next 2 hours walking the same hallways, checking the same doors, trying not to think about the conversation he'd just had, or the promise he'd just made. One evening. That's all it was. A few hours of his life to make someone feel better about almost dying. He could handle that. Probably. Emma noticed something was wrong at breakfast the next morning. You're quiet, she said, watching him over her cereal bowl. I'm always quiet. Quieter than usual? Did something happen at work? Nathan poured himself more coffee. Nothing happened. Dad? Emma. She rolled her eyes. Fine. Keep your secrets, but you're a terrible liar and you look worried. I'm not worried. See? Terrible liar. Nathan couldn't help but smile. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more when it's inconvenient. Fair point. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. Emma had a project due for school, something about the solar system that involved way too much glitter, and Nathan helped her pack supplies while trying not to get glitter on his work clothes. Dad, you know you can talk to me, right? Emma said as they headed for the door. About stuff. If something's bothering you. Nathan stopped, his hand on the doorknob. I know, sweetheart, and if something was really wrong, I'd tell you, I promise. Okay. She didn't sound entirely convinced, but she let it drop. Can we get pizza for dinner? We had pizza 3 days ago. So? Pizza doesn't have an expiration date on when you can eat it again. Pretty sure it does. It's called variety. Variety is overrated. They argued good-naturedly all the way to the car, and by the time Nathan dropped Emma at school, he'd almost convinced himself that everything was fine. One gala. One evening. Nothing to worry about. The lie lasted until he got home and found an envelope taped to his apartment door. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy cardstock that probably cost more than his grocery budget, all elegant script and embossed lettering. The St. Haven Hospital Annual Charity Gala, honoring the late Robert Vale and celebrating the opening of the new emergency wing. Black tie optional. Please RSVP. Tucked behind the invitation was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to attend. I know this isn't easy for you, and I appreciate your willingness to step outside your comfort zone. The gala begins at 7. If you don't own a suit, my assistant can arrange for one. Just let me know. SV. Nathan stared at the note for a solid minute, then crumpled it and threw it in the trash. He didn't need her buying him clothes. Didn't need her assistant arranging anything. He had a suit, one suit, from Sarah's funeral, stored in the back of his closet, where he didn't have to look at it. It would be fine. Everything would be fine. The weeks passed faster than Nathan wanted them to. He tried to forget about the gala, tried to focus on work and Emma and the normal rhythm of his life. But the invitation sat on his kitchen counter like a ticking clock, counting down to an evening he'd agreed to but didn't want. Emma found it 2 weeks before the event. What's this? She held it up, reading the fancy script. A gala? Are you going to a gala? Nathan was washing dishes, his hands deep in soapy water. It's a work thing. Since when does hospital security go to galas? Since the hospital decided to have one. Emma's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You're being weird again. I'm not being weird. You're absolutely being weird. Is this about that woman? Nathan's hand stilled in the water. What woman? The one Mrs. Chen told me about. The rich lady who keeps coming to the hospital asking for you. Of course Mrs. Chen had told her. The woman saw everything, knew everything, and apparently had no concept of keeping certain things to herself. It's not about her, Nathan said carefully. The hospital's opening a new emergency wing. They invited all the staff. In fancy invitations that get hand-delivered? Emma, I'm not stupid, Dad. Something's going on. Nathan dried his hands and turned to face his daughter. She stood in the kitchen doorway, the invitation still in her hand, looking far too perceptive for 9 years old. Okay, he said. You want the truth? Always. A few weeks ago, a woman was brought into the hospital after a car accident. She was hurt pretty badly, and I helped stabilize her before the doctors could operate. She survived, and now she wants to thank me publicly at this gala thing. That's it. That's the whole story. Emma processed this information, her face going through a series of expressions Nathan couldn't quite read. You saved someone's life, she said finally. The doctors saved her life. I just helped. That's not what it sounds like. That's what happened. And she wants to thank you at a fancy party? Apparently. Emma was quiet for a moment, then smiled. That's actually kind of cool, Dad. Nathan blinked. It is? Yeah, I mean, you're always saying you just check doors and break up fights. But you actually saved someone. That's like superhero stuff. It's not superhero stuff. It's just medicine. Still cool. Emma handed him back the invitation. Are you going to wear that old suit from the closet? Probably. It's going to need dry cleaning. It smells like mothballs. How do you know what it smells like? I was looking for Halloween costume ideas last month. Found it in the back. She wrinkled her nose. Definitely needs cleaning. Nathan looked at the invitation, then at his daughter, and felt something shift in his chest. Maybe this didn't have to be the terrible thing he'd built it up to be. Maybe it was just what Emma said, kinda cool. A chance to be recognized for something good, even if he didn't want the attention. Okay, he said, I'll get it cleaned. And you should probably get a haircut. Now you're pushing it. I'm just saying, if you're going to a fancy party, I'm not getting a haircut. Stubborn, Emma muttered, but she was smiling. The suit turned out to be salvageable. Nathan dropped it at the dry cleaners on Monday and picked it up Thursday, along with a new shirt because the old one had a stain he didn't remember and couldn't identify. The whole thing cost more than he wanted to spend, but Emma was right. If he was doing this, he might as well do it properly. The gala was on a Saturday. Nathan traded shifts with Marcus to get the night off, arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch Emma, and spent most of Saturday afternoon trying not to think about what the evening would bring. Emma helped him with his tie. You're nervous, she observed, adjusting the knot. I'm not nervous. Your hands are shaking. That's just coffee. Too much coffee. Right. She stepped back, examining him critically. You look good, Dad. Professional. Nathan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. The suit fit better than he remembered. Or maybe he'd lost weight without noticing. His hair was too long despite Emma's nagging, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when Sarah was alive. But overall, he looked presentable. "Thanks, sweetheart." "Are you going to have fun?" "Probably not." "Then why are you going?" Nathan considered how to answer that, because sometimes we do things we don't want to do because it's the right thing. Because someone asked nicely, and saying no would be mean, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Even then, Emma thought about this. "That seems hard." "Yeah," Nathan agreed. "It is." The hospital looked different at night, transformed by lighting and decoration into something that barely resembled the place where Nathan spent his shifts. Valet parking had taken over the main entrance. People in expensive clothes moved through doors held open by staff he didn't recognize. Music drifted from somewhere inside. Not hospital music, but the kind that came from actual musicians being paid actual money. Nathan sat in his car for 5 minutes, working up the courage to go inside. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "You've got this, Dad? Be brave." He smiled despite himself, texted back a quick heart emoji, and got out of the car. The lobby had been converted into something unrecognizable. White tablecloths covered every surface. Flowers, expensive ones that actually smelled good instead of the cheap ones that just looked pretty, filled huge vases strategically placed around the room. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and appetizers that Nathan couldn't identify, but assumed were fancy. He felt immediately out of place. "Mr. Cole?" A young woman in a sharp suit appeared at his elbow, her smile professional and slightly rehearsed. "I'm Jennifer, Ms. Vale's assistant. She asked me to watch for you. Can I get you something to drink?" "I'm fine, thanks." "The main reception is through those doors. Ms. Vale is currently greeting guests near the stage, but she wanted me to let you know she'd like to speak with you before the formal program begins. Around 7:30? Nathan checked his watch. 7:15. "Okay, perfect. There's a quiet room set aside for VIP guests if you'd prefer to wait there instead of in the crowd. I'll just—" Nathan gestured vaguely at the room. "Blend in." Jennifer's smile didn't waver. "Of course. I'll come find you at 7:30. She disappeared into the crowd, and Nathan was left standing alone in a room full of people who all seemed to know each other. Doctors he recognized from the hospital, dressed in suits instead of scrubs. Local politicians whose faces he'd seen on campaign posters. Wealthy donors who probably funded entire wings and expected buildings named after them in return. None of them looked at him twice. Nathan found a corner near a pillar and tried to make himself invisible. He was good at invisible. It was visible that gave him problems. "Nathan Cole. Never thought I'd see you at one of these things." He turned to find Dr. Morrison approaching, champagne in hand, looking far more comfortable than Nathan felt. "Dr. Morrison. Please, we're not in the hospital. Call me David." Morrison gestured with his glass. "How are you finding our little soiree?" "Overwhelming." "It's certainly that. Hospital board goes all out for these events. Good for fundraising, terrible for anyone with social anxiety." Morrison took a sip of his champagne. "Scarlet Vale's been looking for you, you know." "So I've heard." "She's planning something. Won't tell me what, but knowing Scarlet, it'll be dramatic." Morrison studied Nathan carefully. "You uncomfortable with that?" "I'm uncomfortable with all of this." "Because you saved her life?" "Because I'd rather just do my job and go home." Morrison nodded slowly. "I get that. But for what it's worth, what you did that night, that was extraordinary. Not many people could have done what you did under those circumstances." "Any trained medic could have—" "No," Morrison interrupted gently. "Not any trained medic. Someone with real combat experience. Someone who's worked in conditions where hesitation means death." He paused. "Where'd you serve?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Afghanistan, Iraq, a few other places." "How long?" 8 years. "And then you came here to work security?" "Needed something steady. Something where I didn't have to worry about Emma." "Your daughter, right? Angela mentioned her." Morrison's expression softened. "Look, I don't know your story, and you don't have to tell me. But whatever brought you here, whatever made you walk away from medicine, that doesn't change the fact that you're damn good at it. Scarlett's alive because of you. You should let yourself take credit for that." Before Nathan could respond, Jennifer reappeared at his elbow. "Mr. Cole? Miss Vale is ready for you." Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. "Good luck. Try to enjoy yourself." Nathan followed Jennifer through the crowd to a smaller room off the main hall. Scarlett stood by a window, her back to the door, staring out at the city lights. She'd changed since their last meeting. The sling was gone, though Nathan noticed she still favored her left arm slightly. Her dress was dark blue and probably cost more than his car, her hair pulled back in a way that showed off the scar cutting through her eyebrow. "Ms. Vale," Jennifer said quietly, "Mr. Cole is here." Scarlett turned, and something in her expression caught Nathan off guard. Nervousness, maybe, or uncertainty. Emotions that didn't fit with the confident CEO who'd cornered him in hospital lobbies. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming." She dismissed Jennifer with a small nod, waiting until the door closed before continuing. "I know this isn't easy for you. It's fine." "You're a terrible liar," Nathan almost smiled. "So my daughter keeps telling me." Scarlett moved closer, and Nathan noticed the way she walked, careful, measured, like someone still learning to trust their body after trauma. "I want to be honest with you about tonight," she said. "The program includes a segment where I'm supposed to thank the people who saved my life. Morrison, the surgical team, the paramedics." She paused. "And you." Nathan's stomach dropped. "We had a deal." "I know. And I'm keeping it. I'm not mentioning your name, I'm not pointing you out in the crowd, but I'm acknowledging that someone stabilized me before the doctors arrived. Someone who didn't have to help but did anyway." Her dark eyes met his. "I need to do that. Not for publicity, not for recognition, but because pretending you don't exist feels like lying about what saved my life. You said no publicity. And there won't be. Your name stays private, but the act itself, that matters." Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that acknowledgement was publicity, that even vague references would lead to questions he didn't want to answer. But looking at her face, seeing the desperation there, he understood this wasn't about him. It was about her need to make sense of what happened, to control a narrative that had spun out of control the moment metal hit metal on a rainy highway. "Fine," he said quietly, "but after tonight, this is done. No more visits, no more thank yous, no more trying to give me things I don't need." "After tonight," Scarlett agreed, "we go back to our separate lives." "Good." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance and didn't quite know how to exist in the same space. "Can I ask you something?" Scarlett's voice was softer now. "What you said to me that night, live better. What did you mean?" Nathan looked at her, this woman who had everything money could buy and still seemed lost. "Exactly what it sounded like," he said. "You got a second chance. Most people don't. Make it count for something. And if I don't know how, then figure it out. You're smart enough to build a company. You're smart enough to figure out what matters." Scarlett's smile was sad. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. People just make it complicated." A knock on the door interrupted them. Jennifer's voice. "Ms. Vale? They're ready to begin." Scarlett took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders in a way that reminded Nathan of soldiers he'd known, people putting on armor before walking into battle. "Thank you for coming," she said again, "and thank you for saving my life." Then she was gone, leaving Nathan alone in the quiet room with nothing to do but wait for whatever came next. The program started at 8. Nathan found a seat in the back, as far from the stage as possible, and tried to ignore the speeches about generosity and community and the importance of emergency medicine. Hospital administrators talked, board members talked. A local politician whose name Nathan didn't catch talked for way too long about healthcare policy. Then Scarlett took the stage. She looked different up there, confident, poised, every inch the CEO who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. When she spoke, her voice carried easily across the room. No notes, no hesitation. 4 weeks ago I died, she began, and the room went silent. For 3 minutes my heart stopped. I was gone. And if not for the extraordinary people at this hospital, the paramedics who refused to give up, the surgical team who worked through the night, Dr. David Morrison, whose skill gave me a second chance, I wouldn't be standing here tonight. Nathan watched her, saw the control in every word, every gesture. But before the doctors could save me, before the surgery, before any of the medical miracles that followed. Someone else made a choice. Someone saw a stranger bleeding out in a trauma bay and didn't walk away. Someone used their training and their courage to keep me alive long enough for the real heroes to arrive. She paused. I don't know if that person wants to be thanked publicly. I don't know if they even see themselves as a hero. But wherever they are tonight, I want them to know, you gave me a sunrise, and I'm going to spend every day I have left trying to deserve it. The room erupted in applause. Nathan sat perfectly still, his hands gripping the edge of his seat, willing himself to become invisible. Scarlett's eyes swept the crowd. For one terrible moment, Nathan thought she might point him out despite her promise. But her gaze moved past him, and then she was thanking the donors, talking about the new emergency wing, transitioning into the fundraising pitch that was probably the whole point of the evening. Nathan stood up and slipped out the back. The hallway was blessedly empty, cool and quiet after the press of bodies in the main hall. He found a bench near the old emergency entrance, the one that would be replaced by Scarlett's fancy new wing, and sat down, trying to slow his racing heart. He'd done it. Showed up, fulfilled his promise, made it through the evening without incident. Now he could leave, go home, go back to his quiet life where nobody looked at him twice. That was quite an exit. Nathan's head snapped up. Scarlett stood a few feet away, her heels dangling from one hand. Couldn't you have just stayed inside? Nathan asked tiredly. Couldn't you have just stayed through dinner? I kept my end of the deal. I showed up. You did. Scarlett moved closer, sitting down on the bench with a small wince. And I kept mine. No name, no pointing you out, just the truth about what happened. The truth is you're alive. That's all that matters. Is it? She turned to look at him. Because from where I'm sitting, the truth is that a man with extraordinary training chose to work as a security guard in a hospital, and when faced with an emergency, he couldn't help but be who he really is. Nathan's voice went cold. You don't know who I really am. Then tell me. Why? So you can feel better about yourself? So you can package it into some neat story about redemption or second chances? So I can understand why someone who clearly cares about saving lives walked away from medicine. Nathan stood up. I need to go. Nathan, don't. He turned to face her. You wanted your thank you. You got it. Now let this be done. Scarlett stood too, and there was something fierce in her expression now. You told me to live better, to make it count. But how am I supposed to do that when the person who saved me won't even accept basic gratitude? I don't need your gratitude. Maybe not. But I needed to give it. Her voice cracked slightly. Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up in a hospital bed and not remember how you got there? To have people tell you that you died, that your heart stopped, that you should have been gone? And the only thing you can remember through all of it is a stranger's voice promising you'd see the sunrise? Nathan said nothing. What could he say? I built a company, Scarlett continued, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've got properties on 3 continents, a foundation that's supposed to help people, influence in circles that matter, and none of it mattered when my car hit that guardrail. The only thing that mattered was whether someone was willing to help a stranger. That's what people do, Nathan said quietly. They help each other. Not in my experience. Scarlett's laugh was bitter. In my experience, people help when there's something in it for them. When there's a transaction, a benefit, a reason. You're the first person I've met in years who did something just because it was right. Then you're meeting the wrong people. Probably. She looked at him, really looked, and Nathan felt uncomfortably exposed. Live better, you said, make it count. I've been thinking about that every day since. What it means to live better when you've already got everything. What it means to make it count when you've spent years just existing. Nathan recognized something in her voice then. The same emptiness he heard in his own when he was being honest with himself. The same sense of going through motions, fulfilling obligations, surviving instead of living. I don't have answers for you, he said. I'm barely holding my own life together. You have a daughter who adores you, a job you show up for every day, the strength to walk away from something you were clearly good at because it costs too much. Scarlett's voice softened. That's not barely holding together. That's choosing what matters. It doesn't feel like enough. Does it ever? They stood in silence, 2 broken people in an empty hallway, neither one sure what came next. "I should go," Nathan said finally. "Emma's waiting." "Okay." Scarlett stepped back, letting him pass. "Thank you for coming tonight." "Really?" Nathan nodded, started walking away. "Nathan?" He stopped, didn't turn around. "If you ever change your mind about the job offer, about any of it, the door's open." "I won't." "I know, but it's open anyway." Nathan left without looking back, walked through the lobby full of people who were just starting dinner, past the valet stand and into the parking lot where his car waited. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to figure out why he felt worse now than he had before. Emma was still awake when he got home, sitting on the couch with Mrs. Chen, watching some cartoon movie they'd both seen a dozen times. "Dad!" Emma jumped up. "How was it?" "It was fine." "Just fine?" "They gave speeches, raised money, the usual." Emma's face fell slightly. "Did she thank you?" "She thanked everyone who helped her." "But did she thank you specifically?" Nathan pulled Emma into a hug, breathing in the familiar smell of her shampoo. "It doesn't matter, sweetheart. What matters is she's okay." "You're a good person, Dad." "I try." After Mrs. Chen left and Emma finally went to bed, Nathan stood in his kitchen, still in the expensive suit, drinking water from a glass that was probably older than his daughter. The invitation sat on the counter where Emma had left it. He picked it up, read Scarlett's handwritten note one more time. "Live better. Make it count." He told her that, told her like he had any idea what it meant, like his own life was some shining example of making the right choices. What a joke. Nathan threw the invitation in the trash, changed out of the suit, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another night of walking halls and checking doors. Emma would go to school. Bills would need paying. Life would continue in its small, manageable way. And Scarlet Vale would go back to her world of boardrooms and foundations and problems that money could solve. That's what he wanted, what he'd asked for. So why did it feel like he'd just walked away from something that mattered? Nathan closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tried not to think about dark eyes that had looked at him like he was worth something. Tried not to hear a voice that cracked when talking about second chances and sunrises and the weight of having everything except what mattered. By morning, he'd almost convinced himself he'd made the right choice. Almost. 3 weeks passed in a blur of ordinary moments that Nathan told himself were enough. Emma aced her solar system project. The car's strange noise turned out to be nothing serious. Marcus covered 2 of Nathan's shifts so he could attend a parent-teacher conference that consisted mostly of Emma's teacher telling him things he already knew. His daughter was brilliant, kind, and occasionally too honest for her own good. Life returned to its comfortable rhythm, and Nathan almost forgot about champagne glasses and expensive dresses and dark eyes that had looked at him like he mattered. Almost. The hospital was busy on the night everything changed again. Some kind of stomach bug had torn through the pediatric ward, and the emergency room was overflowing with people who probably just needed rest and fluids, but were panicked enough to come in anyway. Nathan spent most of his shift directing confused family members to the right departments and reminding people that no, they couldn't all crowd into a single patient room. The gala was in full swing upstairs, a continuation of the fundraising efforts, this time focused specifically on the new wing's equipment needs. Nathan had made sure to trade shifts so he'd be working the lower floors, far from the ballroom and the kind of people who wrote checks with too many zeros. He was checking the locks on the east entrance when his radio crackled. "All units, we need security to the main ballroom. Medical emergency." Nathan's hand went to the radio. What kind of emergency? "Elderly male collapsed, unresponsive. We've got staff on the way," but Nathan was already running. The ballroom was chaos. People clustered in groups, some trying to help, most just standing around looking horrified. In the center of the crowd, an older man, 70s, maybe 80s, lay on the floor, his face gray, his chest still. A woman knelt beside him, her hands hovering uselessly over his body. "Someone help him, please. Someone, move!" Nathan pushed through the crowd, his training taking over before his brain could catch up. "Everyone back, give him space." He dropped to his knees beside the man, fingers going immediately to check for a pulse. Nothing. No breathing, no movement, skin already cooling. How long has he been down? Nathan's hands moved automatically, tilting the man's head back, checking his airway. I don't maybe a minute, 2 minutes. He just collapsed. Someone called for a crash cart. Nathan positioned his hands on the man's sternum, started compressions. 30 pushes, firm and controlled, the way he'd done 1,000 times in places a lot worse than a hospital ballroom. And clear this crowd, now. People scrambled back. Nathan counted in his head, muscle memory guiding his hands. 30 compressions, then he moved to the man's head, gave 2 rescue breaths, watched for the chest to rise. Nothing. Back to compressions. Sir, we have medical staff. A security guard Nathan didn't recognize tried to intervene. Then get them here faster. Until they arrive, I'm what he's got. 30 more compressions, each one precise, each one buying seconds. Someone time this. I need to know how long we've been down. A voice from the crowd. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Still salvageable. Still within the window where brain damage wasn't guaranteed. Nathan kept working. His entire world narrowed to the rhythm of CPR and the hope that this stranger's heart would remember how to beat. Sweat ran down his back despite the ballroom's air conditioning. His shoulders burned with the effort, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. 4 minutes. Come on, Nathan muttered between compressions. Come on, stay with me. The crowd had gone silent, watching. Nathan was vaguely aware of phones pointed in his direction, of whispered conversations, of the weight of all those eyes. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the man beneath his hands and the seconds ticking away. 5 minutes. A crash cart burst through the crowd, pushed by 2 nurses Nathan recognized from the ICU. Right behind them came Dr. Morrison, still in his tuxedo from the gala, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding in the time it took to assess the scene. Nathan, what have we got? Elderly male, sudden collapse, witnessed arrest. Nathan didn't stop compressions. 5 minutes down, I've been on him for most of it. No response yet. Morrison moved beside him, already pulling on gloves. Let's get him on the monitor. On my count. Stop compressions. Nathan waited for the signal, then pulled back. Morrison attached the defibrillator leads while one of the nurses took over rescue breathing. The monitor shrieked its flatline warning. V-fib, Morrison said. Charge to 200. Clear. Nathan moved back, hands raised. The man's body arched off the floor. The monitor hesitated, jumped, then settled into a pattern that made Nathan's chest tighten with hope. Sinus rhythm. Weak, but there. We got him, Morrison breathed. Good work, Nathan. Damn good work. The nurses moved in with oxygen and equipment. Morrison started barking orders about transport to ICU, about tests they'd need to run, about calling the man's family. The organized chaos of emergency medicine took over, and Nathan found himself pushed to the edges, no longer needed. He stood there, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, watching them work. The crowd was still staring, phone still recording, and standing near the back, her face pale and her eyes locked on him, was Scarlet Vale. Nathan turned and walked away before anyone could stop him. He made it to the stairwell before his legs gave out. Sat down hard on the concrete steps, his head in his hands, trying to breathe through the crash that always followed. The shaking got worse, his whole body remembering every time he'd done this, every person he'd saved or failed to save, every moment when someone's life hung on the edge and only his hand stood between them and the dark. The door above him opened, footsteps on the stairs. Nathan. Of course it was her. Who else would it be? I need a minute, he said without looking up. You just saved that man's life. Morrison saved his life. Morrison got there after you'd already brought him back. Scarlett's heels clicked as she descended the stairs, stopping a few steps above him. Everyone saw it. Everyone watched you drop to the floor and just... You didn't even hesitate. There wasn't time to hesitate. Most people would have frozen. Most people would have waited for the professionals. Nathan finally looked up at her. I am a professional. I'm just not wearing the right uniform anymore. Scarlett sat down on the step beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, some expensive scent that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. Who is he? She asked quietly. The man you saved. I don't know. Does it matter? It might. To him, when he wakes up. If he wakes up. You gave him that chance. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. This is what you do, isn't it? Not walking halls and checking doors. This, saving people.
Nathan's laugh was hollow. I used to, not anymore. Why not?
Because I'm tired. Because I gave 8 years to saving people in places where saving one meant watching 10 more die. Because I came home to find my wife gone and my daughter growing up without a mother, and I decided I was done carrying that weight. He stood up abruptly. I need to get back to work. Nathan, just let it go, Ms. Vale, please. Just let it go. He left her sitting on the stairs and went to find Marcus, who took one look at his face and didn't ask questions. Nathan finished his shift in a fog, going through the motions, trying not to think about the crowd's faces or the phone's recording, or the way it had felt to have someone's life balanced on the edge of his hands again. When his shift ended at 7, Nathan sat in his car and stared at his phone. 3 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, 2 voicemails, a text from Angela that just said, OMG. Nathan followed by a string of emojis he was too tired to interpret. He deleted everything and drove home. Emma was already awake, making herself breakfast. Cereal with too much sugar and not enough milk, the way she liked it when he wasn't watching. Morning, sweetheart. Morning. She looked it up, her expression shifting to concern. You okay? You look weird. Long night. You always have long nights. This is different weird. Nathan poured himself coffee. Just tired. Dad? Emma put down her spoon. What happened? He could have lied, should have lied, but Emma had Sarah's ability to see through him, and he was too exhausted to maintain the pretense. Someone collapsed at the hospital last night. I helped until the doctors arrived. Emma's eyes went wide. Did they die? No, they're in ICU, but they're alive. Because of you? Because of a lot of people. But you helped save them. It wasn't a question. Emma stood up, came around the table, and hugged him hard. You're a hero, Dad. Nathan closed his eyes, wrapped his arms around his daughter, and tried not to think about all the people he hadn't saved. All the times being a hero hadn't been enough. I'm just a guy who was in the right place at the right time, he said into her hair. Twice. You've been in the right place twice now. Luck. That's not luck. That's you being who you are. Nathan wanted to argue, but Emma squeezed tighter and he let it drop. Let her believe in heroes in right places and the idea that saving people made you special instead of just tired. The story broke online before noon. Nathan saw it on his phone during lunch, a shaky video someone had taken at the gala, showing him dropping to the floor, starting CPR, working with the single-minded focus of someone who'd done this before. The headline read, Mystery Hospital Guard Saves Second Life in Month. By 2 p.m., the video had 50,000 views. By dinner, it was on the local news. Nathan turned off his phone and tried to pretend the world outside his apartment didn't exist. It didn't work. The hospital called 3 times. Marcus texted, Dude, you're famous. Also, management wants to talk to you. But Angela called from a number that wasn't her cell. Nathan, it's me. Don't come in for your shift tonight. They want to do a press conference tomorrow morning and just call me, okay? This is getting big. The only call Nathan answered was from Emma's school, and only because he thought something might be wrong. Instead, the principal wanted to congratulate him on his heroic actions and ask if he'd be willing to speak at an assembly about community service. Nathan declined as politely as he could and hung up. By the time Emma got home from school, reporters were camped outside their apartment building. Dad, there are people with cameras downstairs, Emma said, peering out the window. Are they here because of you? Probably. What do they want? To turn what happened into a story. Isn't it already a story? They want to make it a bigger one, with interviews and questions about my past, and Nathan stopped himself. They want more than I'm willing to give. Emma looked at him, her face serious. What are you going to do? Wait them out. Eventually they'll get bored and leave. And if they don't, then we'll figure something out. They ordered pizza and watched movies and tried to ignore the occasional camera flash from outside. Emma fell asleep on the couch around 9, and Nathan carried her to bed like he had when she was small. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him check the screen first. The text was from Scarlett. I know you don't want this attention. I can make it go away. Just say the word. Nathan stared at the message for a long time before typing back, How? Her response came immediately. Press conference tomorrow. I'll tell them you value your privacy, that you're a humble man who doesn't want recognition. I'll redirect the focus to the new wing, to the hospital's training programs, to anything except you. But you need to show up, just once. Let them see your face, hear you say you're not interested in being a celebrity, and then they'll move on. Nathan typed, I don't trust the media. Scarlett, neither do I. But I trust my PR team. They're very good at making stories disappear. Please, let me help you. Nathan wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her he'd handle it himself, that he didn't need her rescuing him the way he'd rescued her. But the truth was, he didn't know how to make this go away. Didn't know how to navigate the kind of attention that came with viral videos and local news coverage. What time? He finally typed. 9 a.m. Hospital conference room. I'll handle everything. Okay. Thank you. And Nathan, I'm sorry this happened. He didn't respond. Just set the phone down and sat in the dark living room, listening to Emma breathe in the next room, trying to figure out when his life had spun so completely out of his control. The press conference was worse than Nathan imagined. The hospital conference room was packed. Reporters, cameras, microphones clustered at the front, like some kind of media firing squad. Hospital administrators sat at a long table, with Morrison beside them, and an empty chair that Nathan assumed was for him. Scarlett stood near the door, talking to a woman in an expensive suit who was probably the PR person she'd mentioned. When she saw Nathan, she excused herself and came over. You ready? Nathan looked at the crowd. No, I'll do most of the talking. You just need to confirm the basics. Yes, you helped stabilize the gentleman. Yes, you're glad he's recovering. No, you don't want recognition. Then we're done. Just like that? Just like that. Scarlett's hand briefly touched his arm. Trust me. The thing was, Nathan realized, he did trust her. Didn't know why, didn't know when that had happened, but somewhere between hospital stairwells and gala ballrooms, he'd started believing she actually cared about more than just managing her image. They took their seats. The cameras immediately focused on Nathan, and he fought the urge to look away. Morrison leaned over and whispered, Breathe. You've faced worse than this. Had he? Nathan wasn't sure anymore. Scarlett stood, and the room quieted. Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, 2 nights ago, an incident occurred during our fundraising gala that has garnered significant media attention. Mr. Harold Whitmore, a longtime hospital donor and friend, suffered cardiac arrest in the main ballroom. Thanks to the immediate intervention of our staff, Mr. Whitmore is currently in stable condition and expected to make a full recovery. She gestured to Morrison. Dr. David Morrison led the medical response and deserves our gratitude for his quick thinking and expertise. However, before Dr. Morrison arrived, another member of our hospital family initiated CPR that very likely saved Mr. Whitmore's life. All eyes turned to Nathan. Nathan Cole has worked at St. Haven Hospital for 3 years as a member of our security team. What many people don't know is that Mr. Cole is a decorated combat medic who served multiple tours overseas. When faced with an emergency, his training took over, and he did what he's always done. He helped someone in need. Scarlett's voice took on a firmer edge. Now, I know many of you want a hero story. You want interviews and exclusive details and a narrative about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And while that's a compelling story, it's not the one Mr. Cole wants told. He's a private person who did his job, a job he's very good at, and then tried to return to his normal life. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Ms. Vale, is it true that Mr. Cole also saved your life after your car accident last month? Scarlett didn't hesitate. Yes. Mr. Cole was instrumental in stabilizing me before surgery. I've already thanked him privately for that, and I'm using this opportunity to thank him again publicly for his continued dedication to saving lives. Mr. Cole, another reporter, this one with the camera crew. Can you tell us about your military service? Nathan's hands gripped the edge of the table. Scarlett started to intervene, but Nathan shook his head slightly. I served for 8 years, he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Did my job, came home, moved on. That's all there is to tell. But surely your training... My training taught me to help people when I could. That's what I did 2 nights ago. That's what I'd do again if needed. But I'm not looking for recognition or media attention. I'm just trying to raise my daughter and do my job. He looked directly at the camera. I'd appreciate it if everyone could respect that and let this story end here. The room erupted with questions, voices overlapping, cameras flashing. Scarlett raised her hand for quiet. Mr. Cole has made his position clear. Out of respect for his privacy and his service, both to his country and to this hospital, I'm asking the media to honor his wishes. The real story here isn't about one man. It's about the incredible emergency response team at St. Haven Hospital and the new wing that will save countless lives in the years to come. She smoothly transitioned into talking about the fundraising goals, about the equipment needs, about everything except Nathan. The reporters tried to steer it back, but Scarlett and her PR person were professionals, and within 15 minutes, they'd successfully redirected the narrative. Nathan sat through it all, feeling like an exhibit in a museum, something to be looked at but not touched, acknowledged but not understood. When it finally ended, Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. "Well done, I know that wasn't easy." "Is it over?" "The worst of it, yeah. There'll be some lingering interest, but Scarlett's team is good. They'll make sure the story dies down." Nathan nodded, started to stand, then froze. Standing at the back of the room, partially hidden behind a pillar, was a man with a camera. Not a news camera, something smaller, professional, the kind photojournalists used. The man was young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of intense focus that made Nathan's instincts flare, warning. The man raised the camera and took a picture. Nathan looked away, told himself it didn't matter, that one more photo in a sea of photos wouldn't change anything. But something about the way the man was looking at him, calculating, assessing, like he was putting together pieces of a puzzle, made Nathan's stomach twist. "Nathan," Scarlett had noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I need to go." "Wait." But Nathan was already moving, pushing through the lingering crowd, heading for the exit. He needed air, needed space, needed to get away from the cameras and the questions and the feeling that he was being dissected under a microscope. He made it outside before Scarlett caught up. "Nathan, stop, please." He turned. "What?" "You did great in there. I know it was hard, but you handled it perfectly." "I don't care about handling it perfectly. I just want it to be over." "It will be. Give it a few days, maybe a week. The news cycle moves fast. Something else will catch their attention." "And what about that guy with the camera? The one taking pictures like he was gathering evidence?" Scarlett's expression shifted. "What guy?" Back of the room, young, dark hair, professional camera. He wasn't with the regular press. "I'll have security check it out." She pulled out her phone, started typing. Probably just a freelancer hoping to sell photos to a magazine. "Probably," Nathan agreed, but the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the hospital continued its endless rhythm. People coming and going, ambulances arriving, life and death operating on schedules that didn't care about press conferences or viral videos. "The man from the gala, Whitmore, he's asking to meet you," Scarlett said quietly. Nathan's jaw tightened. "No. He's 83 years old. You gave him more time with his family. He just wants to say thank you." "I don't need his thanks." "Nathan, how many times do I have to say it? I don't want recognition. I don't want gratitude. I don't want to be paraded around as some kind of hero." His voice rose slightly. "I did what anyone with training would do. That's it. That's all it was. That's not all it was." Scarlett stepped closer. "You keep saying that, keep trying to diminish what you did. But I was there. I saw your face when you were working on him. That wasn't just training. That was someone who cares, who couldn't walk away even if they wanted to." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Her dark eyes searched his. "You saved my life and asked for nothing. You saved Harold Whitmore's life and tried to disappear. You work a job you're overqualified for because it keeps you close to your daughter. Everything you do is about helping other people while pretending you're not worth helping yourself." Nathan felt something crack in his chest. "Stop." "Why? Because I'm right? Because you've spent so long convincing yourself you're just a security guard that you've forgotten who you really are? I know exactly who I am." The words came out harsh. "I'm someone who's seen enough death to last a lifetime. I'm someone who came home from war to find the only person who mattered was gone. I'm someone who chose his daughter over a career because that's what fathers do. And I'm someone who doesn't need a billionaire telling him his life has meaning just because he knows CPR.
Scarlett flinched like he'd slapped her. That's not what I told him. Yes, it is. You want to make me into something I'm not because it makes you feel better about what happened. Because if I'm some tragic hero, then your survival means something more than luck and timing. Nathan's voice dropped. But I'm not tragic. I'm not a hero. I'm just tired, Ms. Vale. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd let me go back to being nobody. He walked away before she could respond, before he could see if his words had landed the way he'd intended, or if they'd just made everything worse. The apartment was quiet when he got home. Too quiet. Emma was at school, wouldn't be back for hours, and Nathan found himself pacing the small living room like a caged animal. He'd been cruel to Scarlett. Knew it, felt it sitting heavy in his chest. She'd only been trying to help, and he'd thrown her kindness back in her face because he was scared and angry and so damn tired of feeling exposed. His phone rang. Morrison. Nathan, you okay? Yeah. Why? Because you looked like you were about to punch someone when you left. And Scarlett Vale is currently sitting in my office looking like she might cry, which I didn't think was possible. Nathan closed his eyes. I said some things I shouldn't have. Want to tell me what happened? Not really. Fair enough? Morrison was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, Harold Whitmore's doing well, asking about you every hour. His family wants to send you something, flowers, maybe a gift basket, I don't know. I told them you probably wouldn't accept it. You told them right. Nathan, I get it. You don't want the attention, but maybe you could just let people be grateful, just this once? I let Scarlett be grateful. I showed up to her gala. I sat through a press conference. How much gratitude am I supposed to accept? However much you need to accept to realize you deserve it. Morrison's voice was gentle. Look, I don't know your whole story, don't need to, but I know good people when I see them, and you're one of the best. You've saved 2 lives in a month, probably more before that. You're allowed to feel good about that. I don't feel good about it. I feel exhausted. Then maybe that's what you need to work on. Morrison paused. There's no shame in being proud of yourself, Nathan, in letting yourself be more than just Emma's dad or the night shift security guard. You can be both. You can be all of it. Nathan didn't know what to say to that. Think about it, Morrison said, and maybe apologize to Scarlett. She's trying to help, even if she's going about it wrong. After they hung up, Nathan sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling. The water stain shaped like a dog was still there, had been there since they moved in. He'd kept meaning to fix it, kept not getting around to it. Some things were easier to ignore than address. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, my name is Thomas Chen. I'm a journalist with the Tribune. I'd love to talk to you about your military service and how it prepared you for civilian heroics. Happy to pay for your time. Nathan deleted it without responding. Another text, different number. Nathan Cole? This is Rebecca Stone from WKTV News. We're doing a segment on everyday heroes and would love to feature your story. Delete. A third? Hey man, saw your video. Respect. You ever think about teaching CPR classes? I run a community center and could use someone like you. That one Nathan kept, though he didn't respond. Maybe later, when things calmed down, when he could think about helping people without feeling like he was performing for an audience. Emma came home full of energy and questions. Dad, everyone at school saw the video. Jenny Sanders said her mom thinks you should run for city council. Can you imagine? You sitting in boring meetings talking about streetlights? Sounds like my version of hell. That's what I told her. I said you'd rather eat glass than make speeches. Emma dropped her backpack and flopped onto the couch. But seriously, it's pretty cool. My dad, saving people, making a difference. I'm always making a difference. I keep you fed and housed and mostly out of trouble. That's different. This is like big difference, important difference. Nathan sat down beside her. You think what I do for you isn't important? That's not what I meant. Emma's face scrunched up, trying to find the right words. It's just, I always knew you were special. Now everyone else knows too. I don't want everyone else to know. I just want to be your dad. You can be both. She said it so simply, like it was obvious. Mom used to say you had a gift for helping people, that it was part of who you were, like how some people are good at art or music. You're good at saving lives. Nathan's throat tightened. When did she say that?
Before she got sick, when you were still deployed and I asked her why you had to keep leaving. She said you had a gift and it would be selfish to keep it just for us when other people needed it too.
Emma leaned against him. I think she'd be proud of you for still using your gift even when you don't have to. Nathan pulled his daughter close, buried his face in her hair, and tried not to let her see how much those words had cracked him open. That night, after Emma went to bed, Nathan did something he hadn't done in years. He opened the drawer in his nightstand and took out the medals. They were tarnished, forgotten, symbols of a life he'd tried to leave behind. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Medical Badge. Each one represented moments he'd rather forget, lives saved and lost, decisions made in seconds that carried weight for lifetimes. He ran his thumb over the Purple Heart, remembering the explosion that had earned it, the ringing in his ears that lasted for days, the Marine whose legs he'd tourniquet while his own blood soaked through his uniform from shrapnel he hadn't noticed until later. Sarah had been so angry when he'd finally told her about that day. Angry that he'd minimized it, that he'd tried to pretend the scar on his side was from something minor. Angry that he always put others first, even when it cost him. But she'd understood too. Had known that the part of him that ran toward danger instead of away from it was the same part that had fallen in love with her, that had promised to be there for Emma no matter what. You couldn't separate the hero from the man. They were the same person, just wearing different faces depending on what the moment required. Nathan put the medals back in the drawer and closed it. Maybe Morrison was right. Maybe Scarlett was right. Maybe even Emma, with her 9-year-old wisdom, was right. Maybe it was time to stop running from who he used to be and figure out how to be both versions of himself at once. The thought terrified him. But then again, most things worth doing usually did. Nathan spent the next morning staring at his phone, trying to find the right words for an apology he wasn't sure how to give. 3 times he typed out messages to Scarlett, and 3 times he deleted them. I'm sorry I was an ass seemed too casual. I apologize for my inappropriate behavior sounded like something from a corporate handbook. I shouldn't have said those things was true, but incomplete. Finally, he gave up and decided face-to-face was better anyway. Apologies over text were for people who didn't have the guts to own their mistakes in person. The problem was finding her. Nathan didn't have her schedule, didn't know if she was even at the hospital or off running her company or doing whatever billionaires did with their days. He could text her assistant, but that felt wrong. Like admitting he needed help with something that should be simple. The universe solved his problem for him. He was walking through the main lobby around 2 in the afternoon, ostensibly checking that the new security protocols were being followed, but really just avoiding the apartment where Emma's judgment hung in the air like accusation, when he spotted Scarlett near the elevators. She was with an older couple, the Whitmores, Nathan realized, recognizing them from photos that had run in the paper alongside stories about Harold's recovery. Scarlett was speaking softly, her hand on Mrs. Whitmore's arm, her expression gentle in a way Nathan hadn't seen before. He started to turn away, to let the moment pass, but Mrs. Whitmore saw him. "That's him!" her voice carried across the lobby. "That's the young man who saved Harold." Every head in the vicinity turned. Nathan felt his face heat up, felt the familiar urge to run, but his feet stayed planted. Running would just make it worse. Running would make him a coward on top of everything else. Scarlett's eyes met his, and Nathan saw surprise there. Then something that might have been hope. The Whitmores crossed the lobby faster than people in their 80s probably should have moved. Mrs. Whitmore reached him first, grabbing both his hands in hers. "Mr. Cole, we've been hoping to meet you." Her eyes were wet. "You gave us more time. That's all we wanted, just more time. And you gave it to us." Nathan's throat felt tight. "I'm glad he's recovering." "Recovering?" Harold Whitmore's voice was rough but strong. "Boy, I'm thriving. Doctors say I've got the heart of a man 20 years younger. Of course, that's after you got it started again." He extended his hand. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." Nathan shook the offered hand. "You don't need to thank me." "The hell I don't." Harold's grip was surprisingly firm. "I died at my own charity gala. Would have been embarrassing as hell if you hadn't brought me back." Despite everything, Nathan almost smiled. "Can't have that." "We wanted to do something for you," Mrs. Whitmore said. "A donation in your name, or perhaps—" "Please don't." Nathan pulled his hands back gently. "I appreciate the thought, but I don't need anything. Just seeing Mr. Whitmore up and walking is enough. At least let us take you to dinner, Harold insisted. You and your daughter. I hear she's quite the young lady. Nathan glanced at Scarlett, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. That's very kind, Nathan said carefully. But we won't take no for an answer, Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. One dinner, that's all we're asking. Let us thank you properly. There was something in her face, a desperate need to do this one thing, to make the gratitude tangible, that reminded Nathan of Scarlett at the gala. Some people needed to give thanks the way other people needed to breathe. Denying them felt cruel. Okay, he heard himself say. One dinner. Mrs. Whitmore's face lit up. Wonderful. We'll arrange everything through Ms. Vale's office. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Truly. They left, still holding hands, still moving like they'd stolen extra time from a universe that didn't give second chances easily. Nathan and Scarlett stood alone in the lobby that suddenly felt too empty. I came looking for you, Nathan said before he could lose his nerve. To apologize. Scarlett's expression softened. You don't need to, Yeah, I do. I was cruel. You were trying to help, and I threw it back in your face because I was scared and angry and taking it out on the wrong person. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. I pushed too hard. I keep doing that, seeing a problem and trying to fix it, whether it wants fixing or not. She smiled sadly. My assistant says it's my biggest flaw. Your assistant sounds smart. She is. Keeps me from making a complete fool of myself at least 60% of the time. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Around them, the hospital continued its rhythm, oblivious to the small human moment happening in its lobby. The Whitmores are good people, Scarlett said quietly. Harold's foundation has funded half the hospital's major initiatives over the past decade. His wife runs a literacy program that's changed thousands of lives. They're the kind of wealthy that actually tries to do something meaningful with it. Unlike you, Nathan regretted the words the moment they left his mouth. Sorry, that was fair? Scarlett's laugh was bitter. I've been asking myself the same question for weeks. What am I actually doing with all this money and influence? Building tech platforms? Throwing galas? Making speeches about innovation while the most innovative thing I've done lately is survive a car crash? That's not nothing, isn't it? She looked at him directly. You save lives. The Whitmores change lives. I just exist. Very comfortably. Very publicly. Very pointlessly. Nathan had spent weeks trying to convince her he wasn't special, and now here she was, convinced she wasn't either. The irony wasn't lost on him. You sponsored the new emergency wing, he pointed out. That'll save lives. My father's money sponsored it. I just put my name on the check. Then do something that's yours. Something that matters to you. Like what? Nathan shrugged. I don't know. What did you care about before you became too successful to remember? Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Medicine, she finally said. Before business school, before the company, I wanted to be a doctor. Emergency medicine, specifically. Thought I could make a real difference. What changed? My father got sick, cancer. The company needed leadership, and I was the only child, so... She trailed off. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back to medical school after he recovered. But he didn't recover, and the company grew, and suddenly 10 years had passed and I was wearing expensive suits to board meetings instead of scrubs. Nathan saw something in her expression, the same regret he carried, the same sense of having taken a wrong turn somewhere and driven so far down that road that turning back seemed impossible. It's not too late, he said. I'm 30 years old. Medical school is a 4-year commitment, plus residency, plus... So you'd be a doctor at 38 instead of 30. So what? You'll be 38 anyway. Might as well be doing something that matters. Scarlett stared at him. You're serious? Why wouldn't I be? You told me to live better, to make it count. Maybe that goes both ways. I built a billion-dollar company. And you're miserable. I can see it every time you talk about your life. Nathan softened his voice. Money doesn't mean anything if you hate how you spend your days earning it, says the man working as a security guard. I don't hate my job. It lets me be there for Emma, keeps me close to medicine without drowning in it. It's not what I planned, but it works. He paused. Does yours? Scarlett opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with the expression of someone whose leash had just been yanked. "I have a meeting," she said. "Board of directors. We're deciding whether to acquire a smaller competitor or develop our own competing product. Very important, very urgent." The sarcasm in her voice was thick enough to cut. "Want to know the truth? I don't care which option we choose. They'll both make money. They'll both be fine. And I'll still go home to an empty penthouse and wonder why nothing feels like enough." She turned to leave, then stopped. "The Whitmore's dinner. I hope you actually show up. Emma would enjoy it. Harold tells terrible jokes, and his wife makes everyone feel like family. Will you be there? Do you want me to be?" Nathan considered this question. A week ago, he would have said no, would have wanted distance, separation, a return to the careful boundaries he'd constructed around his life. But something had shifted after the press conference, after watching her redirect media attention away from him, after seeing the exhaustion in her eyes that mirrored his own. "Yeah," he said, "I think I do." Scarlett's smile was genuine this time. "Then I'll be there." She left, heels clicking on the polished floor, back straight despite the weight she carried. Nathan watched her go and wondered when he'd started seeing past the expensive clothes and practiced confidence to the person underneath who was just as lost as he was. His radio crackled. "Nathan, got a situation in the parking garage. Can you check it out?" He unclipped it. "On my way." Back to work. Back to the normal rhythms that made sense, that didn't involve complicated feelings or uncomfortable truths, just doors to check and problems to solve and a daughter to pick up from school in 3 hours. Simple, manageable, safe. Exactly what he needed. The dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday at an Italian restaurant Nathan had never heard of, but Emma assured him was super fancy, Dad, like the kind of place where they give you tiny portions and charge $100. "How do you know about places like that?" Nathan asked, helping her pick out a dress that was nice enough for dinner, but not so nice she'd complain about being uncomfortable all evening. Jenny Sanders went to one for her birthday. Said the pasta came in a portion you could fit in your palm, and her parents still paid more than we spend on groceries in a month. Jenny Sanders needs to stop measuring everything by price tags. That's what I told her. She said I was just jealous because we're poor. Nathan stopped mid-search through Emma's closet. "What did you say to that?" "I said we're not poor, we're just not wasteful, and that having money didn't make her interesting, it just made her boring with better shoes." Despite himself, Nathan grinned. "That's my girl. She didn't talk to me for 3 days. And it was the best 3 days of the month." Emma held up a navy blue dress. "This one? Perfect. Now we just need to make sure I have a tie that isn't covered in coffee stains." They arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early because Nathan had overcompensated for traffic that didn't exist. The place was exactly as fancy as Emma had predicted. All soft lighting and expensive wine bottles displayed behind glass and waiters who moved like they were performing ballet. Nathan felt immediately out of place in his one good suit that still smelled faintly of mothballs despite the dry cleaning. Emma, however, looked right at home. She'd insisted on doing her own hair, pulling it back in a way that made her look older than 9, and she'd borrowed a necklace Sarah used to wear, a simple silver chain with a small pendant. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Nathan said, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous. Your tie is crooked, you've checked your phone 6 times, and you keep doing that thing where you crack your knuckles when you're stressed. When did you become so observant?" "I've always been observant. You just don't notice because you're too busy being nervous." A hostess approached, all professional smile and practiced charm. "Mr. Cole, your party is waiting. Please follow me." The Whitmores had secured a private dining room in the back, a small space with a single table, more wine bottles, and enough silverware to make Nathan wonder if they were supposed to eat or conduct an orchestra. Harold and his wife were already seated, both dressed like they'd just come from somewhere important. Scarlett sat across from them, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost more than Nathan's rent, but looked effortless in the way only expensive things could. "Nathan! Emma! Welcome! Welcome!" Harold stood up, moving easier than he had in the hospital lobby. "Please, sit. We've been looking forward to this all week." Mrs. Whitmore immediately focused on Emma. "Oh, aren't you lovely? Your father's told us so much about you." Emma glanced at Nathan, who shrugged. He'd told them almost nothing, but apparently Mrs. Whitmore was the type who filled in gaps with imagination. "Thank you. Emma said politely, letting Nathan pull out her chair. It's nice to meet you both. Scarlett's told us you're quite the student, Harold said, settling back into his seat. Top of your class? Usually. Sometimes Michael Chen beats me in math, but I'm working on it. Competitive, I like that. Harold grinned. Reminds me of myself at that age. Dinner started with appetizers Nathan couldn't identify, and wine he politely declined in favor of water. Emma ordered sparkling water with lemon, sitting up straight and using the fancy silverware like she'd been doing it her whole life. Nathan made a mental note to ask her where she'd learned table manners he certainly hadn't taught her. The conversation flowed easily, surprisingly. Harold told stories about his early days in business, back when he'd been young and hungry and stupid enough to take risks that had somehow paid off. His wife interjected with corrections and additions, the two of them moving through shared history with the ease of people who'd been doing it for decades. Scarlett was quieter than usual, watching the Whitmores with something Nathan recognized as longing. Not for their money or status, she had plenty of both, but for the partnership, the history, the sense of being part of something bigger than yourself. So Nathan, Harold said between courses, what are your plans? Can't imagine you want to work hospital security forever, talented as you are. Nathan set down his fork. I'm happy where I am. Are you? Mrs. Whitmore's eyes were kind but sharp. Forgive an old woman's observation, but you don't strike me as someone who's happy being underutilized. I'm not underutilized. I'm exactly where I need to be for Emma. What if you could be both? Scarlett spoke up, her voice careful. Present for Emma and using your training to help people on a larger scale? Nathan shot her a look. They'd talked about this. About boundaries. About not pushing. But Scarlett just met his gaze steadily, and Nathan realized she wasn't pushing. She was asking. Like what? Emma said before Nathan could respond. What would Dad do? Well, Harold leaned back, I've been thinking about this since Scarlett mentioned your father's background. Our foundation funds a lot of programs, but we've never had a strong emergency preparedness initiative, training programs for civilians, community response teams, that sort of thing. Harold, Nathan started, hear me out. You'd develop curriculum, train instructors, coordinate with hospitals and community centers. Real work that makes a real difference. And the schedule would be flexible, family-friendly hours, mostly administrative with some hands-on teaching. I'm not qualified to... You have 8 years of combat medical experience, and you've saved 2 lives in the past month just by being in the right place at the right time. You're more qualified than anyone I could hire. Harold smiled. And before you say no, the salary would be triple what you're making now. Nathan felt Emma's eyes on him, felt the weight of everyone's expectations settling on his shoulders. I appreciate the offer, he said carefully, but I'm not looking to change careers. Why not? Emma's voice was small but clear. If it means you could help more people, and we'd have more money for things like fixing the car and not worrying about rent. Emma, no, Dad, I'm serious. You're always saying we have enough, and we do, but wouldn't it be nice to have more than enough? To not have to choose between groceries and school supplies? Nathan felt something crack in his chest. He'd thought he was protecting Emma by keeping their life small and manageable. But maybe all he'd been doing was teaching her that wanting more was selfish, that ambition was dangerous, that the safe choice was the only choice. Can I think about it? The words came out before Nathan could stop them. Harold's grin was triumphant. Take all the time you need. The offer's open-ended. Scarlett caught Nathan's eye across the table and smiled, and Nathan realized she'd probably orchestrated this entire evening. Not maliciously, she wasn't that calculating, but carefully, setting up dominoes and then stepping back to see if they'd fall. He should have been angry, should have felt manipulated. Instead, he just felt tired, and maybe, buried underneath the exhaustion, a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation Nathan only half heard. His mind was elsewhere, calculating possibilities and risks, weighing what he had against what he could have, trying to figure out if wanting more made him greedy or just human. Emma was in heaven, charming the Whitmores with stories about school and asking Scarlett questions about running a company that Scarlett answered with surprising honesty. By the time dessert arrived, some elaborate chocolate thing that Emma declared the best thing she'd ever tasted, Nathan had almost convinced himself that this could work. Almost. Walk with me? Scarlett asked as they were leaving, while the Whitmores were busy convincing Emma to keep the fancy dessert menu as a souvenir. They stepped outside into air that had turned cool, early autumn starting to settle over the city. The restaurant was in a nice part of town, the kind where the streets were clean and the buildings looked maintained and people walked dogs that probably had their own Instagram accounts. You set that up, Nathan said. I facilitated a conversation. There's a difference. Is there? Scarlett turned to face him. Harold's been wanting to start this program for years. He mentioned it to me weeks ago before I even knew who you were. When I told him about your background, he jumped at the chance to meet you. You could have warned me. Would you have come if I had? Nathan didn't answer because they both knew the truth. I'm not trying to run your life, Scarlett said quietly. I'm just trying to show you that you have options. That being a good father doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything else you are. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Help me understand why the idea of doing meaningful work terrifies you so much. Nathan looked at her, this woman who'd had everything handed to her and still managed to be lost, and tried to find words for feelings he'd spent years not examining. Because if I let myself want more, if I let myself believe I could be that person again, and then I fail, his voice cracked. I can't fail Emma. She's already lost her mother. She can't lose me too. You wouldn't be failing her. You'd be showing her that it's okay to try, that it's okay to want more than just enough. What if more isn't better? What if it's just more? Scarlett stepped closer, and Nathan could smell her perfume, could see the faint scar still visible through her eyebrow. Then at least you'll know, she said. At least you'll have tried instead of spending the rest of your life wondering what if. Emma appeared in the doorway, Harold and Mrs. Whitmore behind her, all three of them wearing matching grins that suggested they'd been plotting something. Dad, Mrs. Whitmore invited me to help at her literacy program next weekend. Can I go, please? Nathan looked from his daughter's hopeful face to the Whitmore's kind expressions to Scarlett's steady gaze and felt the last of his resistance crumbling. Sure, sweetheart. That sounds great. Emma cheered, hugging Mrs. Whitmore with the enthusiasm of a 9-year-old who just won a major victory. They said their goodbyes, Harold slipping Nathan a business card with his personal number, Mrs. Whitmore making Emma promise to call her Alice because Mrs. Whitmore makes me sound ancient, Scarlett squeezing Nathan's hand briefly before getting into a car that probably cost more than his annual salary. Nathan and Emma walked to their car in comfortable silence. The streetlights cast long shadows, and somewhere in the distance a siren wailed, heading toward some emergency Nathan wasn't responsible for solving. You're going to take the job, right? Emma asked as Nathan started the engine. I haven't decided yet. You should. It would be good for you. When did you become the parent in this relationship? Someone has to be. Emma grinned at him. Seriously, Dad, you're allowed to want things. You're allowed to be happy. I am happy. You're content. There's a difference. She said it with the confidence of someone who'd been thinking about this for a while. Mom used to say you were happiest when you were helping people, that it made you feel like you were doing what you were meant to do. Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Your mom said a lot of things. She was usually right, though. Yeah, Nathan admitted quietly. She usually was. They drove home through streets that were starting to feel different somehow, not smaller exactly, but less fixed. Like the boundaries Nathan had drawn around his life were fading, revealing possibilities he'd convinced himself didn't exist. The apartment felt smaller when they got back. Emma went straight to her room to change, and Nathan stood in the kitchen, Harold's business card in his hand, staring at numbers that represented a door he could walk through or ignore. His phone buzzed. A text from Scarlett. Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't easy. For what it's worth, I think you'd be amazing at the job. But I also think you'd be amazing at whatever you choose to do. The point is choosing, not settling. Nathan typed back, Stop being wise, it's unsettling. Her response came quickly. I learned from the best. Someone once told me to live better and make it count, trying to return the favor. Nathan smiled despite himself, then opened his laptop and did something he hadn't done in 6 years. He Googled emergency medical training programs, community health initiatives, civilian response teams. Read about organizations doing exactly what Harold had described, teaching people to save lives, building networks of trained responders,
making communities safer through education and preparation. It was exactly the kind of work Nathan had dreamed about before the war had taught him that dreams were just pretty lies you told yourself before reality arrived. But maybe reality didn't have to be so harsh. Maybe there was space between the extremes of battlefield trauma and hospital security for something in the middle. Something meaningful that didn't require sacrificing everything he'd built with Emma. He was still reading when Emma appeared in the doorway, wearing her pajamas and clutching the stuffed bear she pretended she'd outgrown. "You're researching it, aren't you? The job?" "Just looking. Doesn't mean I'm taking it." "But you're thinking about it." "Yeah," Nathan admitted. "I'm thinking about it." Emma crossed the room and hugged him, the bear squished between them. "Whatever you decide is okay. I just want you to be happy, Dad. Really happy, not just pretending." Nathan held his daughter close and wondered when she'd gotten so smart, so perceptive, so much like Sarah it sometimes hurt to look at her. "I love you, sweetheart." "Love you too. Even when you're being stubborn. Especially when I'm being stubborn." Emma laughed and went to bed, leaving Nathan alone with his laptop and his thoughts, and the business card that felt heavier than any piece of paper had a right to feel. He thought about Scarlett's words, about living better and making it count. Thought about Emma's face when she'd asked why he wouldn't take a job that could help more people. Thought about Harold Whitmore, alive and laughing and getting more time because Nathan had been there when it mattered. What if he could be there more often? What if instead of waiting for emergencies to find him, he could train others to respond? What if the gift Sarah had talked about, the one Emma remembered, the one Nathan had tried to bury, could be used without destroying him in the process? The questions kept him awake long past midnight, kept him turning over possibilities like stones, looking for the sharp edges that would cut him if he grabbed them wrong. By the time he finally fell asleep, Nathan still didn't have answers. But for the first time in 6 years, he was willing to admit he needed them. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start. Nathan called Harold Whitmore on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the dinner, and 48 hours after Emma had stopped asking if he'd made a decision and started leaving printouts about emergency medical programs on the kitchen table where he couldn't miss them. "Mr. Whitmore, it's Nathan Cole." "Nathan? Please call me Harold. Mr. Whitmore was my father, and he's been dead 20 years. Harold's voice was warm, familiar. "I'm guessing this isn't a social call. I want to talk about the job, if the offer's still open." "It is. When can you start?" Nathan almost laughed. "Don't you want to interview me? Check references? Make sure I'm not completely incompetent at anything that doesn't involve CPR? I've seen your resume, or what Morrison managed to piece together from your military records. I've watched you save 2 lives, and more importantly, I watched you at dinner with your daughter. Any man who raises a kid like Emma while working nights and keeping himself together, that's someone I want on my team. I might not be good at this. The administrative stuff, the planning, You'll learn, and you'll have support. We're not throwing you in the deep end alone." Harold paused. "Unless you're getting cold feet." Nathan looked around his apartment, the water-stained ceiling he kept meaning to fix, the second-hand furniture that had been second-hand when he'd bought it, the photographs of Sarah scattered around like breadcrumbs, leading back to a life that felt both close and impossibly distant. "No cold feet, just making sure you know what you're getting." "I know exactly what I'm getting. The question is, do you?" Nathan thought about that. "I'm getting a chance to stop hiding. That's terrifying." "Good. Means you're paying attention." Harold's voice softened. "Listen, Nathan. I'm 83 years old. I died at my own party and got a second chance because you refused to let me go. That changes a man's perspective, makes you realize life's too short to waste on fear or regret or playing it safe. You've been playing it safe for 6 years. Time to stop." "You sound like my daughter." "Smart kid. Takes after her father." Harold laughed. "So, you in?" Nathan closed his eyes, thought about Sarah telling him he had a gift, thought about Emma saying he was allowed to be happy, thought about Scarlett's words about choosing instead of settling. "Yeah," he said. "I'm in." They worked out the details over the next week. Nathan would give the hospital 4 weeks' notice, enough time to train his replacement and wrap up loose ends. The foundation would start immediately on developing the program infrastructure, with Nathan consulting remotely until he could transition full-time. The salary was exactly what Harold had promised, plus benefits that made Nathan's current hospital package look like a bad joke.
Emma cried when he told her. Happy tears, she insisted, but they still made Nathan's chest tight. I'm so proud of you, Dad. I haven't done anything yet. You chose to try. That's everything. Marcus took the news with characteristic sarcasm. So you're abandoning me for the fancy foundation life? Gonna forget all us little people? You make 50 cents more an hour than me. Details. Point is, you're moving up and I'm stuck checking doors forever. You could apply too. They're going to need instructors. Marcus shook his head. Nah, man, this job works for me. I show up, do my rounds, go home. Simple. But you were never built for simple. About time you figured that out. The hospital threw Nathan a small going-away party in the break room. Morrison gave a speech about dedication and courage that made Nathan uncomfortable. Angela cried and made him promise to visit. Even Mrs. Chen from the cafeteria showed up with a container of homemade cookies and a warning to make sure Emma didn't eat them all at once. Scarlett arrived near the end, slipping in quietly and standing at the back. Nathan caught her eye across the room and excused himself from a conversation about insurance benefits he wasn't really following. You came, he said. Wouldn't miss it. This is a big deal. It's a new job. People change jobs all the time. Not like this, Scarlett smiled. You're not just changing jobs, you're changing your whole story. Pretty sure the story's the same, just different chapters. Spoken like someone who's never taken a creative writing class. She handed him a small wrapped box. Consider it a congratulations present. Nathan unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather journal, expensive but understated, with his initials embossed on the cover. For documenting the program, Scarlett explained. Your ideas, your observations, the lives you'll change. Someday Emma might want to read about what her father built. Nathan's throat felt tight. This is too much. It's a notebook, Nathan. Relax. An expensive notebook. From an expensive person. We've been over this. She touched his arm briefly. I'm really proud of you for taking the risk. You barely know me. I know enough. Her eyes held his. I know you saved my life when you didn't have to. I know you see yourself as ordinary when you're anything but. And I know you've spent years making yourself small because you thought that's what being a good father required. She paused. You're about to find out it doesn't. That you can be both. Before Nathan could respond, Emma appeared at his elbow, slightly out of breath. Dad, Mrs. Chen says we need to cut the cake before she has to leave, and she's the only one who knows where the good plates are, and oh, hi, Miss Vale. Hi, Emma. Your dress is beautiful. Emma beamed. She'd insisted on wearing something nice for Nathan's party, settling on the same navy dress from the dinner. Thank you. Dad said it was too fancy, but I told him you can't be too fancy for cake. Your daughter's wisdom knows no bounds, Scarlett told Nathan. Don't encourage her. She's already insufferable. I prefer confidently self-assured, Emma said primly, then grabbed Nathan's hand. Come on. Cake time. The cake was chocolate with too much frosting, exactly the kind of thing hospital staff loved because it was terrible for you and tasted amazing. Nathan cut slices while people he'd worked with for 3 years said kind things about his time there and made jokes about him getting too important to remember the little people. He looked around the room, at Marcus laughing with the night shift crew, at Morrison deep in conversation with Angela, at Mrs. Chen wrapping up leftover cake for Emma to take home, at Scarlett standing slightly apart but smiling like she was genuinely happy to be there. These people had been his life for 3 years, had become familiar in the way colleagues did when you saw them more than your own family. And he was leaving them for something uncertain, something that might fail, something that required him to be more than just the quiet guy who walked the halls. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Nathan's first day at the Whitmore Foundation started in an office that had windows overlooking the city and a desk that wasn't secondhand and a computer that actually turned on when you pressed the button. The contrast to his hospital locker and clipboard was jarring enough that he spent the first 10 minutes just standing there, trying to convince himself he belonged. Imposter syndrome hits everyone on day one. Nathan turned to find a woman in her 40s standing in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing a smile that suggested she'd seen plenty of first-day deer-in-headlights expressions. I'm Rachel Chen, program coordinator. Harold asked me to get you settled. She handed him a coffee. Milk? No sugar, right? I checked with your daughter.
You talked to Emma? She called yesterday, wanted to make sure we knew about your coffee preferences, and that you get grumpy if you skip lunch, and that you're better at helping people than accepting help. Rachel's grin widened. I like her already. Nathan took the coffee, not sure whether to be embarrassed or touched. She's a little overprotective. Wonder where she learned that. Rachel gestured for him to follow her. Come on, let me show you around before the meeting. The foundation offices were nothing like Nathan expected. Instead of stuffy corporate spaces, they felt almost casual. Open floor plans, comfortable furniture, walls covered with photographs of programs and people the foundation had helped. The staff dressed like humans instead of mannequins, and more than one person had their dog at their desk.
We're informal here, Rachel explained, noticing Nathan's surprise.
Harold hates corporate culture, says it makes people forget why they're working in the first place, which is to actually help people, not to look good in annual reports. She stopped at a conference room. The team's waiting. Don't worry, they're going to love you. The team turned out to be 5 people ranging from mid-20s to late 50s, all of whom greeted Nathan like he was already part of the family instead of the new guy who had no idea what he was doing. They spent 2 hours talking about the emergency preparedness program, what existed, what was needed, what Nathan thought would actually work based on his experience. At first, Nathan held back, worried about overstepping or sounding arrogant, but Rachel kept pushing him to share, and gradually he found himself talking about triage systems and community response networks and the importance of training that focused on real scenarios instead of textbook theory. This is exactly what we needed, said Marcus. Different Marcus, older, who ran the Foundation's youth programs. Someone who's actually lived this stuff instead of just studied it.
I haven't taught it before, Nathan cautioned. Combat medicine is different from civilian emergency response. But the principles are the same, right? Stop the bleeding, keep them breathing, get them to professionals. Rachel was taking notes. We're not trying to create combat medics. We're trying to create informed civilians who won't panic in a crisis. Then yeah, I can do that. They broke for lunch around noon. Nathan checked his phone to find 3 texts from Emma asking how it was going, one from Scarlett saying, breathe, you've got this, and one from Harold simply reading, told you. He texted Emma back, good so far, nobody's fired me yet. Her response was immediate, give it time, you're only 4 hours in. Nathan smiled and pocketed his phone. Your daughter? Rachel asked, appearing with sandwiches from somewhere. Yeah, she's invested in how this goes. As she should be, you're building something that'll outlast both of you. Rachel handed him a sandwich. That's the thing about this work. You're not just helping the people you train. You're helping everyone they'll help. Ripple effects. Nathan thought about that while he ate. Thought about all the people he'd saved directly. In combat, in hospitals, in emergency rooms that smelled like blood and fear. But he'd never considered the indirect saves. The ones that came from teaching others, from building systems that worked even when he wasn't there. The math was staggering if you let yourself think about it. The afternoon was spent with Harold and the Foundation's legal team, working through contracts and liability waivers and insurance questions that made Nathan's head hurt. But Harold walked him through it all patiently, explaining the reasoning behind each clause, making sure Nathan understood what he was agreeing to. I want you to feel secure here, Harold said during a break. Not just financially, but emotionally. This isn't about us owning you. It's about us supporting you to do work that matters. Why me, though? You could have hired someone with actual teaching experience, program development credentials, all that. Harold fixed him with the look that reminded Nathan uncomfortably of his drill sergeant back in basic training. Because credentials don't save lives. People do. And you're the kind of person who runs toward danger when everyone else is running away. That's not something you can teach. It's something you are. I'm not. Yes, you are. Stop arguing with people who see you more clearly than you see yourself. Harold softened. Look, I've built a lot of programs over the years, given a lot of money to a lot of causes. Some worked, some didn't. The ones that worked, they had people like you running them. People who cared more about impact than recognition. People who'd been in the trenches and knew what actually mattered versus what looked good on paper. Nathan didn't know what to say to that. So he just nodded and went back to signing forms that would bind him to this new path. By the time he left at 5, an actual reasonable hour, ending when the sun was still up, Nathan felt like he'd run a marathon. His brain hurt from information overload, his hand cramped from signing documents,
and he was pretty sure he'd forgotten half the names Rachel had introduced him to.
But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something that felt almost like excitement. Emma was waiting when he got home, practically vibrating with curiosity. "So, how was it? Tell me everything." Nathan kicked off his shoes and collapsed on the couch. "It was good. Overwhelming, but good." "What did you do?" "Meetings, mostly. Talked about program development, signed about 47,000 forms, tried not to look lost when people used acronyms I didn't understand." "But you liked it?" Nathan thought about how to answer that honestly. "I think I will. Right now it's just scary and new, but the people are good, the work is important, and Harold seems to actually care about doing things right instead of just doing things." Emma plopped down beside him. "Mom would be proud, you know, of you taking the risk." "How do you remember what Mom would think? You were 5 when she died." "I remember the important stuff. How she looked at you when you came home on leave. How she talked about you when you were deployed. She used to say you had a gift for making people feel safer just by being there." Emma leaned against him. "I think she'd be happy you're sharing that gift again instead of hiding it." Nathan pulled his daughter close, breathing in the familiar smell of her shampoo, feeling the weight of her trust in him. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just notice it more when it's convenient." They ordered Chinese food and watched a movie Emma had seen a dozen times but still laughed at like it was new. Normal evening, normal routine, except everything felt different because Nathan's days would be different now. Better hours, meaningful work, a future that extended beyond just surviving to the next paycheck. His phone buzzed around 8. A text from Scarlett. "Survived day 1. Nathan typed back, "Barely. You were right about the imposter syndrome. It gets better. Give it 2 weeks. You'll be running the place." Doubtful. "I spent half the afternoon confused by acronyms. Everyone does. That's why they use them. Makes people feel important." A pause, then, "I'm proud of you. For real." Nathan stared at those words for longer than he should have, feeling something complicated and warm settle in his chest. "Thanks for everything. The push, the job, the belief I could do this. You could have done this anytime. You just needed to believe it yourself. Still working on that part." "That's okay. Some of us are still working on it too." Nathan pocketed his phone and tried to focus on the movie, but his mind kept drifting to Scarlett, to the sadness he'd seen in her eyes when she talked about her company, to the way she'd lit up at dinner when discussing emergency medicine like it was something she'd lost instead of something she'd chosen to leave behind. "Dad?" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "The thing where you're thinking too hard about something and your forehead gets all wrinkly." Nathan consciously smoothed his expression. "I'm not thinking too hard." "You're thinking about Ms. Vale, aren't you?" "What?" "No, why would you?" "Because you get a different kind of distracted when you're thinking about her." Emma paused the movie. "Do you like her?" We're not, she's my employer's colleague, it's professional." "That's not what I asked." Nathan looked at his daughter's knowing expression and wondered when 9-year-olds had become relationship counselors. "It's complicated," he said, finally. "Because she's rich? Because she's dealing with her own stuff and I'm dealing with mine, and neither of us needs the additional complication of—" He stopped. "Why am I having this conversation with a 4th grader?" "Because you don't have anyone else to talk to about it. And because I'm your daughter, which means I'm legally obligated to embarrass you and ask uncomfortable questions." Emma grinned. "So? Do you like her?" Nathan thought about Scarlett standing in hospital stairwells, sitting at fancy dinners, texting encouragement when he needed it. Thought about dark eyes that saw through his deflections, and a voice that called him on his tendency to make himself smaller than he was. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "I think I do." "Good. She likes you too." "You don't know that." "Dad, she shows up to your work parties. She texts you good luck messages. She helped get you a job literally designed around your skills. If that's not liking someone, I don't know what is." "There's a difference between liking someone and—" "It's complicated, Emma." "You keep saying that. Maybe it's only complicated because you're making it complicated." She unpaused the movie. "Just think about it. Mom's been gone 4 years. You're allowed to like someone. Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the reasons why starting something with Scarlett was a terrible idea. But Emma had already turned her attention back to the screen, the conversation apparently over as far as she was concerned. He sat there, not really watching the movie, thinking about what Emma had said. About permission to like someone, to want something beyond just survival and stability. Sarah had been gone 4 years, and Nathan had spent every one of those years treating her memory like a wall he couldn't climb over. But maybe Emma was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind grief and responsibility and the excuse that his life was too complicated for anything beyond the basics. Maybe it was time to just try. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm Nathan hadn't experienced in years. He'd arrive at the foundation by 8, spend his days developing curriculum and training protocols, have lunch with Rachel or Harold or whoever was free, then head home by 5:30 to have dinner with Emma. Weekends were his. No night shifts or schedule swaps, just time to be present in his daughter's life in ways he hadn't managed since Sarah died. The program itself was taking shape faster than Nathan expected. They'd partnered with 3 community centers for pilot programs, recruited 12 potential instructors from various medical backgrounds, and secured funding for equipment and materials. Nathan wrote training modules that balanced technical accuracy with accessible language, drawing on his combat experience but adapting it for civilians who'd never seen trauma worse than a kitchen burn. "This is really good," Rachel said one afternoon, reviewing his latest curriculum draft. "Clear, practical, doesn't talk down to people. Where'd you learn to write like this?" "I didn't, I just pretended I was explaining it to Emma." "Well, keep pretending, it works." The team had stopped treating Nathan like the new guy and started treating him like one of them. They argued with him when they disagreed, asked his opinion like it mattered, trusted him to make decisions about the program without running everything past Harold first. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Scarlett started showing up at the foundation more often than her role probably required. She'd claim she was there for board meetings or to review financials, but she'd always find time to stop by Nathan's office, to ask how things were going, to offer suggestions that were actually helpful instead of just meddling. "You're stalling," Nathan said one Thursday afternoon, watching her rearrange books on his shelf that didn't need rearranging. "I'm organizing. There's a difference." "You've been organizing for 15 minutes. The meeting you're supposedly here for started 10 minutes ago." Scarlett set down the book she'd been holding. "Okay, fine. I'm stalling." "Why?" "Because the meeting is about quarterly projections and market analysis and things I used to care about but can't seem to anymore." She sat in the chair across from his desk. "Everything feels hollow lately, like I'm going through motions instead of actually living." Nathan recognized the feeling. He'd lived it for 6 years. "So change it," he said. "To what?" "I don't know. What did you say you wanted before your father got sick? Emergency medicine?" "That was a lifetime ago." "Was it? Or have you just convinced yourself it was to make giving it up easier?" Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. "I'm 30 years old, Nathan. If I went back to medical school now, I wouldn't be practicing until I was almost 40. "So? You'll be 40 anyway. Might as well be doing something you love." "That's what you said before. Still true. Doesn't stop being true just because time passes." Scarlett smiled sadly. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. People make it complicated by adding all these conditions. I'll be happy when I have more money, when I have more time, when circumstances are perfect. But circumstances are never perfect. You just have to decide what matters and go after it." "Like you did with this job." "Like I did with this job," Nathan agreed. "Scared the hell out of me. Still does some days, but it's better than spending another 6 years being safe and miserable." Scarlett stood up, started pacing. "My board would lose their minds. The company needs leadership. There's a product launch next quarter, merger discussions with 3 potential partners. The company will survive without you. Companies always do. But will you survive without doing something that actually matters to you?" She stopped pacing, looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. "When did you become so wise?" "When I stopped being so scared." Nathan stood too, moved around the desk. "Look, I'm not saying quit tomorrow. I'm saying think about it. Really think about whether the life you're living is the one you want or just the one that happened because you stopped asking questions. You should write fortune cookies." "I'm serious, Scarlett. So am I." but she was smiling. Thank you for caring enough to push back.
Someone recently told me that people who care about you will push you to be better instead of just comfortable. Figured I'd return the favor. They stood there, closer than professional distance really required, and Nathan felt the air shift into something charged and complicated. I should go to that meeting, Scarlett said, not moving. Probably. They're going to ask where I was. Tell them you were getting career advice from an overqualified security guard. Former security guard? Current program director? She reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. I'll think about it. Medical school. Making changes. All of it. Then she left, and Nathan stood there feeling like something important had just happened, but he wasn't quite sure what. The program's first public training session was scheduled for a Saturday in October, 6 weeks after Nathan had started. They'd advertised through community centers and local hospitals, hoping for maybe 20 participants. 60 showed up. Okay, this is either amazing or a disaster, Rachel muttered, looking at the packed room. Both, Nathan said. Definitely both. He'd been nervous all morning, running through his presentation, checking equipment, making sure everything was perfect. Emma sat in the front row, beaming with pride, having insisted on coming to support him. Scarlett sat a few rows back, trying to be unobtrusive but failing because she was Scarlett Vale, and people noticed. Harold opened with a short speech about community preparedness and the Foundation's commitment to saving lives. Then he introduced Nathan, and suddenly 60 pairs of eyes were on him, waiting. Nathan's hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking somewhere between the second week of training and now had remembered what it felt like to be confident in his knowledge, instead of constantly second-guessing. My name is Nathan Cole, he began. 6 years ago, I was a combat medic. 3 months ago, I was working hospital security. Today, I'm here to teach you how to save lives. He talked about the basics, CPR, wound management, recognizing shock, demonstrated techniques on the dummy they'd purchased, answered questions ranging from basic to complex. The hour flew by faster than Nathan thought possible, and when it ended, people lingered to ask more questions, to share stories about emergencies they'd witnessed, to thank him for making the information accessible instead of intimidating. A woman in her 50s approached him near the end, her eyes red like she'd been crying. My husband died 2 years ago. Heart attack. I didn't know what to do, just stood there frozen while he... She stopped, composed herself. If I'd known then what you taught today, maybe he'd still be here. But at least now I can help someone else. Thank you for that. Nathan felt his throat tighten. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's okay. Or it will be. Because of people like you, teaching people like me. She squeezed his hand. You're doing important work. Don't stop. After she left, Nathan found Emma waiting by the door. You were amazing, Dad. Like really amazing. Everyone was paying attention and asking questions, and you made it look so easy. It wasn't easy. I was terrified. You didn't look terrified. You looked like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Scarlett appeared beside them. She's right. That was incredible, Nathan. The way you connected with people, made complex information simple without being condescending, that's a gift. It's just teaching. No, it's not. It's caring enough to teach well. There's a difference. Scarlett's smile was genuine. Harold's already talking about expanding the program. More locations, more sessions. You've created something that matters. Nathan looked around the emptying room, at the equipment still scattered on tables, at the handouts people had taken to study later. 6 weeks ago, this had been just an idea. Now it was real, tangible, making a difference in ways he could see. I couldn't have done it without the team, he said, but you did the hard part. You showed up when you were scared and did it anyway. Scarlett touched his arm. That's everything. They went to dinner afterward, Nathan, Emma, Scarlett, Harold, and Alice. The same Italian place as before, but this time Nathan felt like he belonged there. Like he'd earned his seat at the table through work instead of just occupying space. Emma monopolized most of the conversation, telling the Whitmores about her literacy program work and asking Scarlett increasingly pointed questions about running a business that made Nathan suspect his daughter was planning a future hostile takeover. She's something special, Alice said quietly to Nathan, while Emma was deep in debate with Harold about marketing strategies. She is. I got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You raised a confident, intelligent, caring young woman. That's all you. And Sarah, she did most of the hard work before.
Nathan stopped, the familiar grief catching in his throat. It's okay to miss her, Alice said gently. It's also okay to move forward. Those two things can exist together.
Nathan looked across the table at Scarlett, who was listening to Emma with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions like she actually cared about fourth-grade social dynamics. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm starting to figure that out. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in late November. Nathan was working late, finishing curriculum updates for the expanded program, when his phone rang. Scarlett, which was unusual because she usually texted. Hey, what's up?
I did it. Her voice was breathless, excited. I actually did it. Did what?
Applied to medical school. Early decision, so I'll know by January, but I actually sent in the applications, all 4 of them. Nathan sat back in his chair, grinning. Scarlett, that's amazing. It's terrifying. The board is going to lose their minds when I tell them. My COO already thinks I'm having some kind of crisis, and I haven't been in a classroom in almost 10 years, so I'll probably fail out immediately and, hey, breathe. Scarlett laughed shakily. Right, breathing. That's important. You're going to be great. You're smart, you're dedicated, and you actually care about helping people instead of just making money. Medical schools love that. What if I don't get in? Then you apply again next year. And if that doesn't work, you find another way. But I don't think you'll need to worry about that. How are you so confident? Because I've seen you work. I've seen how you think about problems, how you care about solutions. That's not something you can fake or learn. You either have it or you don't, and you have it. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Thank you for pushing me, for believing I could do this when I wasn't sure I believed it myself.
Someone wise once told me that people who care about you push you to be better. I'm just returning the favor. I want to celebrate. Can I take you and Emma to dinner this weekend? You don't need to. I want to, please. Let me share this with people who'll actually be happy for me instead of people who calculate the financial impact. Nathan smiled. Okay, dinner sounds good.
After they hung up, Nathan sat in his empty office, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how much had changed in 3 months. He'd gone from walking hospital corridors in the middle of the night to building programs that would save lives. Scarlett had gone from going through the motions of running a company she didn't care about to pursuing a dream she'd buried for a decade. Both of them had been so convinced their lives were fixed, unchangeable, determined by decisions made years ago. But they'd been wrong. Life wasn't fixed. It was just waiting for someone to be brave enough to change direction. The celebration dinner was at a different restaurant, more casual, less expensive, the kind of place where Emma could order a burger without worrying about which fork to use. Scarlett showed up looking more relaxed than Nathan had ever seen her, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. I told the board today, she said after they'd ordered, gave them 6 months' notice to find new leadership. The COO nearly had a stroke. How do you feel? Nathan asked.
Absolutely terrified and completely sure at the same time. Is that normal? That's exactly normal. Means you're doing something that matters. Emma, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Ms. Vale, can I ask you something personal? Scarlett smiled. Sure, Emma. Are you and my dad dating? Nathan choked on his water. Scarlett's eyes went wide. The table went silent. Emma, Nathan started. What? I'm just asking. You guys have dinner together, you text all the time, you look at each other weird when you think nobody's watching. Emma looked between them. If you are dating, that's fine. I just want to know if I should be, prepared for it to be official. Scarlett recovered first. We're friends, Emma, good friends. Okay, but do you want to be more than friends? Emma, that's enough, Nathan said firmly, his face burning. I'm just saying, life's short. Mom died when she was 34. You guys aren't getting any younger. If you like each other, you should probably do something about it instead of just being awkward. Scarlett bit her lip, clearly trying not to laugh. Nathan wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Your daughter makes some excellent points, Scarlett said. Please don't encourage her. I'm not encouraging. I'm agreeing. Scarlett's expression turned serious. Emma's right. Life is short. We should probably stop being awkward about this. Nathan looked at her, at the way she was meeting his eyes without flinching, at the hope and uncertainty mixed together in her expression. Yeah, he said quietly. We probably should. Emma pumped her fist victoriously.
Finally, I've been waiting months for you guys to figure this out.
Months? Nathan stared at his daughter. We've known each other for 3 months total.
Exactly. That's way too long to be dancing around obvious feelings. I expected better from both of you. Scarlett laughed, and Nathan found himself laughing too, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally broke into something lighter, easier. Okay, Scarlett said when they'd recovered. So now that Emma has sorted out our relationship status, what happens next?
I have no idea, Nathan admitted.
I haven't dated anyone since Sarah. I'm pretty sure I've forgotten how it works. Well, I haven't dated anyone seriously in 5 years, so we're both out of practice. Scarlett reached across the table, took his hand. We could just figure it out as we go? Emma rolled her eyes. That's literally what everyone does. There's no manual. When did you become a relationship expert? Nathan asked. When you two started being obvious about liking each other but refusing to actually do anything about it, it was painful to watch. They finished dinner in a state of nervous excitement. The dynamic between them shifted but not broken. Scarlett walked them to their car afterward, and Nathan found himself suddenly unsure what came next. I had a really good time tonight, Scarlett said. Even with Emma interrogating us about our feelings?
Especially with that. She's right. We were being ridiculous. We were being cautious. Same thing sometimes. Scarlett stepped closer. Can I see you this week? Just us? Maybe dinner or coffee or whatever people do when they're figuring this out? I'd like that. Good. She kissed him on the cheek, quick and soft. Text me when you're free. Then she was gone, and Nathan was standing in a parking lot feeling like a teenager who'd just gotten his first kiss. Emma was grinning at him through the car window. Don't start, Nathan said as he got in. I didn't say anything. You're thinking it very loudly. I'm just happy for you, Dad. You deserve this. You deserve to be happy. Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand. Thanks, sweetheart. Plus, Miss Vale is really cool and rich, so that doesn't hurt. Emma! I'm kidding. Mostly. I mean, the cool part is definitely true. The rich part is just a bonus.
They drove home through streets that felt familiar but somehow different, like Nathan was seeing them through new eyes. Everything was changing. His job, his relationship status, his entire approach to life. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it just felt right. The medical center opened on a Saturday in March, 6 months after Nathan had started at the foundation. They'd converted an old community building into a state-of-the-art training facility, complete with simulation rooms, classrooms, and equipment that Nathan still couldn't believe he had access to. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was supposed to be small, just the foundation board, key donors, and local officials. But word had spread, and nearly 200 people showed up to celebrate the opening of the Cole Whitmore Center for Emergency Preparedness. Nathan had tried to get them to remove his name from it, had argued that Harold was the one funding everything, that putting Nathan's name on the building was excessive. But Harold had refused. You're the heart of this program, he'd said. Your vision, your expertise, your gift for teaching. The building should reflect that. So Nathan stood at the front of the crowd, scissors in hand, trying not to think about how many people were watching. Emma stood beside him, wearing her nicest dress and looking proud enough to burst. Scarlett was on his other side, her hand finding his and squeezing gently. Harold gave the opening remarks, talking about community and preparedness and the importance of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Then it was Nathan's turn. He looked at the faces in the crowd, some familiar, some strangers, all of them there because they believed in what this center represented. Second chances. New beginnings. The idea that it was never too late to choose a different path. 6 months ago, I was working hospital security, Nathan began. I was convinced my best days were behind me, that I'd given up the right to do meaningful work when I chose to put my daughter first. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was especially wrong about that. He looked at Emma, who was beaming up at him. This center exists because people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, because Harold and Alice Whitmore saw potential instead of just a security guard, because Scarlett Vale refused to let me hide from who I was meant to be, because my daughter reminded me that being a good father didn't mean sacrificing everything else I am. Nathan's voice caught, and he took a moment to compose himself. We built this place for people like I used to be, people who want to help but don't know how, people who've seen emergencies and felt helpless, people who understand that in the worst moments, the difference between life and death is often just someone who refuses to give up. He held up the scissors. The center is for everyone who's ever wanted to make a difference but thought they couldn't. Everyone who's ever been told they're not qualified or skilled or important enough. Everyone who's ever saved a life and then tried to pretend it didn't matter. He paused. You matter. Your desire to help matters. And this place is here to make sure that when the moment comes, you're ready. He cut the ribbon to thunderous applause, and suddenly people were streaming inside, eager to see the training rooms and equipment. Emma hugged him hard, and Scarlett kissed him in front of everyone, and Harold clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise. You did good, kid, Harold said. Really good. The grand opening ran until late afternoon with demonstrations and mini-classes and tours of the facility. Nathan moved through it in a daze, shaking hands and answering questions and trying to process the fact that this was real, that he'd helped build something that would outlast him, that would save lives he'd never know about, that would ripple out into the community in ways he couldn't predict. As evening approached and the crowds thinned, Nathan found himself standing alone in the main training room. The equipment sat ready, the classroom was prepped, the whole space hummed with potential. Pretty incredible, isn't it? He turned to find Scarlett in the doorway. Yeah, still doesn't feel real. Give it time. Eventually you'll get used to being the person who built something this important. Nathan walked to where she stood, pulled her close. Thank you. For everything. For pushing me, for believing in me, for not letting me stay stuck. You did the hard part. I just pointed out what was already there. She smiled up at him. Besides, you returned the favor. I got my acceptance letter yesterday. Nathan's eyes went wide. You got in? To medical school? Full scholarship. They said my application essay about second chances and wanting to save lives instead of just making money was one of the best they'd read. She laughed. I may have borrowed some of your philosophy. Scarlett, that's amazing. He picked her up, spun her around, both of them laughing like kids. I start in August. 4 years, then residency, then finally, I'll be doing what I was always meant to do. Just like me. Just like both of us. She kissed him properly this time. We make a good team. Yeah, Nathan agreed. We really do. Emma appeared in the doorway, followed by Harold and Alice. Are you guys done being mushy? Because Mrs. Whitmore wants to take everyone to dinner, and I'm starving. We're done, Nathan said, but he kept his arm around Scarlett. They walked out of the center together, Nathan, Scarlett, Emma, and the Whitmores, locking the door behind them but leaving the lights on so people passing by could see inside. Could see the space dedicated to saving lives, to second chances, to the idea that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if someone just gave them the tools and the confidence. On the front of the building, mounted in brushed steel, was a plaque that Harold had commissioned without telling Nathan. It read, You're going to see the sunrise. Nathan Cole. Nathan stopped, stared at the words he'd said to Scarlett in a trauma bay months ago, words that had meant one thing then and something entirely different now. I hope you don't mind, Harold said. Alice thought it captured what this place is about, giving people hope when things look darkest. Nathan couldn't speak past the lump in his throat, so he just nodded. They went to dinner at the casual Italian place that had become their regular spot. Emma dominated the conversation with stories about her literacy program and plans for summer that involved entirely too much ambition for a 9-year-old. Harold and Alice were talking about a trip to Europe they'd been planning since before Harold's heart attack, finally feeling confident enough to book it. Scarlett sat close to Nathan, her hand finding his under the table, and they didn't need to talk because some things didn't require words. Later, after they dropped the Whitmores at their house and Emma had fallen asleep in the back seat, Scarlett drove Nathan and his daughter home. You want to come up? Nathan asked. I make terrible coffee, but the company's decent. I'd love to, but I have an early meeting tomorrow. Board's still processing my resignation. She smiled. Soon, though. We have time. Yeah, we do. Nathan carried a sleeping Emma upstairs, tucked her into bed, and stood in her doorway watching her breathe the way he had since she was born. This kid who'd given him a reason to keep going when Sarah died. Who'd pushed him to be better when he was ready to settle. Who'd seen through his defenses and called him out when he was being ridiculous. I love you, sweetheart, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. In his own room, Nathan opened the drawer where he kept Sarah's things. The medals were still there, but he'd added new items, photos from the center's opening, Emma's report card,
A napkin from the first dinner he and Scarlett had gone on alone where she'd written, "This is nice," and he'd kept it because it was. He took out one of the medals, the Bronze Star, and really looked at it for the first time in years. It represented a version of himself he'd thought was gone, buried under grief and responsibility, and the belief that heroism was something you used up and couldn't get back. But he'd been wrong. Heroism wasn't a finite resource that ran out when you stopped wearing the uniform. It was a choice you made every day, to show up, to try, to believe that what you did mattered, even when it felt small and insignificant. He'd saved 2 lives by being in the right place at the right time, but maybe the real impact wasn't those 2 people. Maybe it was the hundreds he'd train, the thousands they'd help, the ripple effect of one person choosing to care and then teaching others to care too. Nathan put the medal back, closed the drawer, and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, he'd go back to the center, would teach another class, would continue building something that mattered. Scarlett would navigate the complicated process of leaving her company while preparing for medical school. Emma would keep being brilliant and occasionally mortifying. The Whitmores would plan their trip and probably try to convince Nathan to go with them. Life would continue in all its messy, complicated, beautiful ways. And for the first time in 6 years, Nathan was ready for it. Ready to stop hiding, stop playing it safe, stop pretending that small and forgotten was the same as happy. He'd told Scarlett to live better, to make it count. And now he was finally taking his own advice. As he drifted off to sleep, Nathan thought about sunrise, the one he'd promised Scarlett, the one that came every morning whether you were ready for it or not. He'd spent years avoiding them, working nights so he didn't have to watch the world wake up and feel the absence of everything he'd lost. But maybe it was time to start facing them again. Time to let the light in, to see what morning brought, to believe that each new day was a gift instead of just another obligation.